You are here, in the middle of a domino effect. One that started years ago, and one that shows no sign of stopping. A bombshell story said UFOs are real. A whistleblower said the government knows. The military has encountered them. Every day, for years, there are videos and photos. Insiders say off-world vehicles. Congress says we need to know more about the UFO. A task force created to figure it out. Are they aliens? Is there doubt? A report's released saying maybe it's real. The information comes with an official seal. A UFO office without delusions will look to the skies and find conclusions. The government seems ready for the long haul, and on the dominoes fall.
I will tell you unequivocally that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This all seems like it's heading towards an ultimate truth no longer ignored. A revelation, for better or worse, will further define the universe. But the story was too good to be true. The story was wrong. And instead of being closer to the truth, we probably couldn't be further away. For those of you unfamiliar with the current UFO story and the cast of characters within, here's a quick primer based on information that was originally reported. In 2007, at the behest of Senator Harry Reid, the Pentagon, via the Defense Intelligence Agency, created a UFO program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. The first director of AATIP was a person whose name wasn't reported and who remained unknown. The next director of AATIP was Lue Elizondo, a counterintelligence official at the Pentagon who by now has become the face of the whole story. AATIP was funded with $22 million. The Pentagon awarded the $22 million to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. BASS was contracted to perform AATIP's UFO research and investigation. BASS was founded by millionaire and longtime Harry Reid financial supporter Robert Bigelow. Bigelow's been hunting UFOs his whole life. Within the BASS team was Hal Puthoff, a former member of the Church of Scientology who claims to be a psychic who can predict the future. During the Cold War, Puthoff was involved in the CIA's Project Stargate, which attempted to create psychic spies that could use paranormal powers to fight the Russians. Stargate was shut down after not achieving this goal. The rest of the BASS team was largely unknown. AATIP investigated UFOs for 5 years, from 2007 to 2012. In 2012, the Pentagon pulled the program's funding and shut it down, saying it was determined that there were other, higher priority issues that merited funding. Despite losing funding, Lue Elizondo claimed he kept AATIP going for years after this, staying on as the program's director. On October 4th, 2017, Elizondo resigned from his job at the Pentagon, frustrated that UFOs were not taken seriously by military leaders at the Department of Defense. Immediately after his resignation, Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, and others took the AATIP UFO story to former Blink-182 rock star Tom DeLonge and his To the Stars Academy, or TTSA, a for-profit science and entertainment company. On October 11th, TTSA held a press event featuring Tom DeLonge, Lue Elizondo, Hal Puthoff, and other former government officials who claimed to have new revelations about UFOs. DeLonge introduced Elizondo to the world for the first time.
My name is Lue Elizondo. For nearly the last decade, I ran a sensitive aerospace threat identification program focusing on unidentified aerial technologies. It was in this position I learned that the phenomenon is indeed real.
In addition to revealing Elizondo and the Pentagon UFO program, DeLonge also announced that he was going to
Build an exotic craft with an energy source that can revolutionize the world.
Build his own UFO. Another presentation by former DOD official Chris Mellon revealed a shocking new UFO case, and he displayed a large photo of the UFO.
At one point, the object soars to 80,000 feet, hovers, then drops at supersonic speeds, coming to a full stop. How did it accomplish these feats?
The UFO in the photo was later reported to just be a blurry party balloon. The mainstream media reaction to this event was couched as cheeky celebrity news, rather than science or national defense. But that was all about to change. On the same day he resigned, members of TTSA had introduced Elizondo to UFO author and longtime UFO researcher Leslie Kean. She interviewed him and published 2 stories in the Huffington Post in mid-October, which revealed in a media exclusive the existence of the Pentagon UFO program and Elizondo's role in it. However, these 2 stories were still mostly ignored by the mainstream media. Leslie Kean then reached out to longtime associate and journalist Ralph Blumenthal. Blumenthal pitched the AATIP and Elizondo story to the New York Times. And on December 16, 2017, the New York Times and Politico released front-page bombshell news stories that revealed the Pentagon's AATIP UFO program to the world. Included in the stories were videos of UFOs filmed by the U.S. Navy. Within hours, dozens of other news agencies had the story. Within days, hundreds. The first domino had finally fallen.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
Full speed ahead. Ain't gonna stop till we're all the way there. Full speed ahead.
But some people had doubts. They noticed that something was off, that some things were not adding up. One of those people was researcher John Greenwald, one of the nation's leading authorities on government secrets. He runs the Black Vault, a website that hosts millions of pages of government documents obtained via the Freedom of Information Act. When he read the December 2017 UFO stories, he immediately noticed some strange discrepancies.
Well, right off the bat, I noticed that the reporting from Brian Bender at Politico and Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper at New York Times had a slightly different program name. Politico says Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. New York Times reports Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Why was there that difference? The amount of sources that both news media outlets had were very, very small and likely the same. So how is it that the reporting was different? As the reporting went on, it got worse. I mean, there were like 7 or 8. I lined them all up with dates and who the media outlet was. And there were like 7 different variations of what AATIP even stood for. And to an investigator or a researcher like myself, and there's a lot of other people out there, if you're looking into something, you need to have the name right. Because if you don't have the name right, how are you going to find anything?
Right. Because when you submit a Freedom of Information Act request, you have to be specific with the government what you're asking for. So if you requested for the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, they could come back and say, hey, that doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Because the name was wrong.
Yep.
And you could suddenly be on a goose chase looking for the truth, for the real documents, correct?
Absolutely. The accuracy there was incredibly important.
The Pentagon officially acknowledging its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program.
The Pentagon has confirmed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
The Advanced Aerospace.
The Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program.
So the writing was on the wall that there was something odd just behind the meaning of the acronym.
Another reported detail that is inconsistent was the years all this supposedly occurred. The original New York Times report said the program began in 2007. But further down the same article, they report the funding and actual contract creation of the program wasn't until late 2008.
You start digging in on that and realize that the bid solicitation was never posted for companies to bid on getting the contract, wasn't posted until 2008. Yet we were led to believe that AATIP started in 2007.
Created in 2007.
2007.
So how can you solicit bids a year after the program allegedly started when the reporting said $22 million went to a contractor that started a year before the bid went in? Wait, none of that makes sense.
Adding to the confusion, Politico's reporting released on the same day as the Times, with reportedly the same sources as the Times, says AATIP began in 2009. What? Now, in journalism, dates and names are so basic. You want to get the basic names right. You want to get the basic dates right. You can't be a year or two off. And to this day, the reported dates of the UFO program remain all over the place.
Generally, in reporting like that, if one thing is wrong, you have to ask the question, what else is wrong?
Further questions and issues arose with Lue Elizondo's role with AATIP. In hundreds of media reports, Elizondo is credited as the director of AATIP. Media outlets also phrased it as he ran the program, or he was in charge of the program. And Elizondo, without doubt, is the face of this whole story now. But the Pentagon has released statements stating Mr. Elizondo had no responsibilities with AATIP. And this is a statement the Pentagon has doubled down on, and they're not budging. And even now, over 4 years later, this central part of the whole story continues to be disputed. Another confusing detail is, at the very top of the original Times report is a video of a UFO filmed by the US Navy. The Times reports that AATIP investigated and released this now famous video to the public. Yet the video was shot in 2015. AATIP shut down in 2012. Also, the Department of Defense released a statement saying no, that video had not been cleared for public release. And some in the media wondered how much of this was simply a so-called sweetheart deal between Senator Reid and his longtime friend and financial supporter, Robert Bigelow. Back in 2017, there were a handful of journalists who pointed this out as a potential red flag.
Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reid and his Political Action Committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture.
There are other outstanding questions, confusing statements, and blatant errors. But despite all this, the story, mostly as originally reported over 4 years ago, mostly without any corrections or updates or disclaimers, continues to spread like wildfire and has become legendary.
So what you're telling me is that UFOs are real.
Bill, I think we're beyond that already. I put my entire career on the line because I believe in what I believe in.
He ran the Pentagon's top secret UFO program.
I knew this was breaking news for the front page of the New York Times.
And then, bam, the New York Times story, it changed everything.
It was a bombshell, right? That's what it was.
This is too big to turn away from.
This is real. Wake up.
TMZ investigates.
I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow just for having this conversation with you.
UFOs, the Pentagon Proof, Tuesday at 8.
Then, in October of 2021, the plot twist. Remember that unknown and unnamed individual who was the first director of the AATIP UFO program? Well, we eventually learned his name, James Lacatski. And after that, we learned his story. He's finally come out of the shadows to set the record straight. Lacatski, along with Colm Kelleher, a project manager for the Pentagon program, and journalist George Knapp, released a book titled Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, an insider's account of the secret government UFO program. They say the story we've been told for over 4 years is wrong. Lacatski's book says, since the December 2017 article in the New York Times, there has been a multi-year frenzy of speculation, misinformation, and confusion about the nature of the program. One of the purposes of this book is to correct the record. Co-author Colm Kelleher did an interview saying,
the New York Times article in December 2017 mistakenly used that acronym AATIP, and they mistakenly assigned Lue Elizondo to be head of this program. And that was a mistake in reporting by the New York Times.
They say many details in the original story were in error. And guess what? There's actually real documented evidence to back that up. And surprisingly, some of these documents have been out in the public domain for years now. It's just that many people, including myself, didn't fully understand what they were or how they related, if at all, to a Pentagon UFO program called AATIP. Probably because they don't mention anything about AATIP and they don't mention UFOs. They mention something else. So I now present to you the mostly untold and underreported story of the Pentagon's AAWSAP program. In 2008, at the behest of Senator Harry Reid, the Pentagon, through the Defense Intelligence Agency, created a program not called AATIP, but rather the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, or AAWSAP. We know this because here's the actual official Pentagon document outlining AAWSAP, not AATIP. The director of AAWSAP was a Defense Intelligence Agency scientist named James Lacatski. We know this because here is his name listed on official Pentagon documents as being in charge of the program. In many ways, AAWSAP started with James Lacatski. According to both Lacatski and Senator Reid, Lacatski had approached the senator to say he believed the UFO phenomena was real, and he wanted a program to investigate not just UFOs, but also how UFOs might fit into the realm of what we might consider the paranormal. Reid told Lacatski he would support the creation of a program, but, according to Reid, they faced a challenge: how to convince Congress to allocate taxpayer money to investigate UFOs. Could they create a UFO program without actually mentioning UFOs? Reid told New York Magazine, I said to Lacatski, well, if you were me, what would you say to people in power in the United States Senate who have huge control over the spending of defense money? And here's what Lacatski said. What I will do is prepare something for you that anyone can look at that wants to, and it's strictly science. He put it in scientific language, what the study should consist of. Here are the actual AAWSAP contract objectives. There are no mentions of UFOs at all. To anyone reading it, it might seem like just a normal aerospace technology contract. The actual objective of the program was essentially, using currently evolving technology trends, predict what kind of aerospace technologies foreign adversaries will have 40 years from now. That's basically it. AAWSAP appeared to be something normal, that the government would normally spend money on. AAWSAP was funded with $22 million. The Pentagon awarded the $22 million to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. BASS was contracted to perform all of AAWSAP's technical research and analysis. We know this because here is an actual Pentagon document acknowledging BASS as the contract recipient. BASS was founded by millionaire and longtime Harry Reid financial supporter Robert Bigelow. Within the BASS team was Hal Puthoff, who we already briefly discussed, as well as other scientists with a history of unorthodox ideas, including Dr. Colm Kelleher and Dr. Eric Davis, an astrophysicist who's written papers discussing psychic teleportation, time travel through Stargate wormholes, and bending spoons with your mind. BASS hired a team of 50 people, and then the work on AAWSAP began. On the surface, AAWSAP appeared to be an aerospace technology program. To Harry Reid, in his words, AAWSAP was actually a program to study UFOs and related phenomena. With Bass, however, that so-called related phenomena would take AAWSAP in a shocking and very unexpected direction. A lot of AAWSAP's investigations took place at Skinwalker Ranch, a supposed paranormal hotspot in Utah owned by Robert Bigelow. As outlined in great detail, on the record, by Lacatski and Bass leadership, the so-called Pentagon UFO program was not just a UFO program, but rather an investigation into a cornucopia of spooky and scary things, including werewolves, ghosts, and half-dinosaur, half-beaver monsters. Literally. The project manager of the program referred to Skinwalker Ranch as a paranormal Disneyland.
So the idea was to have a living laboratory on Skinwalker Ranch that we could assess what was going on. Unusual creatures, discarnate voices, poltergeist activity. So it was a paranormal Disneyland that really started the whole thing off.
AAWSAP spent only 1 year investigating UFOs, ghosts, and goblins before the Pentagon started to pull the plug. In 2009, after reviewing AAWSAP's reports, the Pentagon states that it was determined the reports were of limited value. In the December 2017 Politico article, a congressional staffer is quoted as saying, "There was really nothing there that we could justify using taxpayer money," and that even Harry Reid agreed it was not worth continuing. The Pentagon decided not to renew AAWSAP's funding and shut it down completely by 2012. Stating that the program was terminated in 2012 due to lack of real progress and concerns about the viability of the program, and that it was determined that there were other higher priority issues that merited funding. James Lacatski says he spent the next few years trying to get new funding to resurrect the dead program and to keep the paranormal investigations going, but he was unsuccessful. Finally, Lacatski says he retired in 2016.
And that is the mostly untold story about how $22 million in taxpayer money was spent on a wacky paranormal funhouse. And it appears that at the time, the Pentagon had no idea this silly spooky stuff was even happening. How is that possible? Well, Lacatski, the Pentagon director of the program, says that for security reasons, he was hiding AAWSAP's activities from officials at the Pentagon.
People in my own office, they didn't know what we were doing. They had no idea that I was running Skinwalker Ranch. They had no idea whatsoever.
And was Harry Reid aware of the ghosts and goblins? Well, I guess it depends on which version of his story you want to believe. In 2018, in an interview with New York Magazine, Reid denied ever being briefed or updated on any of AAWSAP's activities. Ever? Ever. But then in 2021, Reid told George Knapp that not only was he aware of AAWSAP's activities at Skinwalker Ranch, but that he was potentially planning to go to the ranch himself.
I remember getting a call from you while you're in the well of the Senate, and you asked about Skinwalker Ranch, whether your staffers should go there and whether they'd be safe. Did you consider sending some of your people to the ranch, and did you ever consider going there yourself?
I considered it, but based on information I got from you and others, I decided not to go.
It would also have drawn attention to the ranch and the program, right? If you went there, you'd have to tell somebody about it.
That's for sure.
And Senator Reid would eventually fully endorse this whole crazy story 2 months before his death by writing the foreword to Lacatski's book. in it, he calls out the New York Times.
The December 2017 New York Times story has done a tremendous amount of good, but unfortunately, it has also muddied the waters. It left the government's AAWSAP program completely out of the narrative.
Yeah, why wasn't any of this stuff reported in that bombshell 2017 New York Times article? How did a story about a program called AAWSAP, which investigated UFOs, werewolves, ghosts, goblins, become a story about a program called AATIP, which only investigated UFOs?
Well, Leslie Kean is a longtime UFO believer and UFO researcher, writing UFO stories going back decades. She wrote a best-selling book on UFOs in 2010, and it was Leslie Kean who approached Ralph Blumenthal to pitch the big UFO story to the New York Times. She was one of the authors of the New York Times article.
In a recent Showtime documentary, Leslie Kean was asked why stories about alleged encounters with alien creatures were not included in her 2017 New York Times article. And she replied that her specific goal with that article was to give UFOs credibility, so she avoided reporting on some things.
I chose not to focus on it because the angle that I was taking in my reporting was to try to get credibility for the subject, and I knew that that was not the way to go. That was not the first step in terms of getting people to accept this.
So an author of the original New York Times article, the article that was the first domino to fall in all of this, says she wrote the article with a specific angle in mind: get people to accept UFOs as real. That sounds like the goal of an activist, not a journalist. But I see where she's coming from, because could you imagine if that first New York Times article had talked about werewolves and poltergeists and giant dino beavers? It would have been laughed at and ridiculed and used as a prime example of the government wasting taxpayer money. But because all of that wasn't mentioned, and only unidentified flying objects were, that New York Times article continues to validate UFOs with not just your average citizen, but also with members of Congress.
Since the New York Times story came out in December 2017, it's politically viable for elected officials to come forward and say, I support this kind of research. But that's for researching things in the sky that might be a threat to national security or to aviation safety. It's another matter for a politician to say, I agree with spending money to investigate places like Skinwalker Ranch with spooky stories of boogeymen and werewolves. No politician is going to fund poltergeist research or looking into werewolves. They'd be crucified.
So how much of the actual story did the original New York Times article report? How much of the actual story is currently influencing Congress?
The scope of the AAWSAP program was gigantic compared to the small sliver of information that was reported via the New York Times. And so the purpose of the book was really to set the record straight. I think the book really encapsulates about 97% of AAWSAP, whereas the 3% was what the New York Times article had described.
3%. According to those actually in charge of the actual program, the original New York Times article about the program only contains 3% of the actual story. 97% wasn't included. So let's talk about the 3% that was. It was originally reported that the name of the program was AATIP, and it was led by a guy named Lue Elizondo. So first, where the heck did the name AATIP come from? In his book, Program Director James Lacatski writes, AATIP was a made-up, substitute name to describe AAWSAP. A made-up name? So he's saying that AATIP
didn't even exist, that AATIP itself was a nickname, and only a nickname, to the AAWSAP program. So they were the exact same thing. AATIP was just a nickname, AAWSAP being the program.
The program was nicknamed Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP. People have had trouble trying to get documents out of the Pentagon by saying they want all documents in AATIP. And they have a hard time because that wasn't actually the name of the program. The top name there is the actual name of the program, but AATIP was the nickname that it went by.
And even Harry Reid and the Pentagon have previously agreed with this. Reid stated in an interview that AATIP and AAWSAP should be considered together. When researcher Roger Glassell asked about the names AATIP and AAWSAP, a Pentagon spokeswoman replied that they were the same program, and that AAWSAP was just an alternative name for AATIP. So how did AATIP become a nickname for AAWSAP? Well, remember how Lacatski said he was hiding AAWSAP from other officials at the Pentagon? How, according to Lacatski, they had no idea whatsoever about AAWSAP's activities? In their book, the authors say Senator Reid and those working at Skinwalker Ranch were worried that AAWSAP's activities would eventually come to light. As such, Senator Reid submitted a request that AAWSAP be given top secret special access status, which, if approved, would have officially limited how many people had access and control over the program. Here is the special access request letter submitted by Senator Harry Reid to Deputy Secretary of Defense William Lynn in 2009. But instead of saying AAWSAP, the actual program name, Reid used the nickname AATIP. But Reid's plan to protect AAWSAP apparently backfired. His request was denied, and his letter was widely distributed within the Pentagon. The cat was out of the bag.
Suddenly, the rest of the Pentagon, which had no idea that this program was underway, they had no idea. Suddenly, everyone knows about it, and they start asking questions. Gosh, what if this gets out that we're involved in study of UFOs and ghosts and creatures?
So two things appear to have happened here. One, Reid's letter was the first time many within the Pentagon had even heard about this program, and Reid's letter used the nickname AATIP. So according to those who were previously in the dark about all this, AATIP was the name of the program. 2, the Pentagon didn't want this embarrassing story spreading outside the Pentagon. They didn't want it in the press, and they didn't want speeches in Congress about government waste. So they moved to shut it all down. The New Yorker quotes a Pentagon official saying, "People worried that if all this came out, that the government was spending money on this will be a bad story." The Pentagon pulled AAWSAP's funding in 2010, and by 2012, the funding had completely dried up and AAWSAP was officially dead. But despite the program being shut down, Lue Elizondo, who had become interested in the UFO aspects of AAWSAP, claims he kept the effort going at the Pentagon. According to James Lacatski, Elizondo adopted and appropriated the name AATIP to describe this new, small, unfunded, and unofficial effort. Lacatski has only done a handful of interviews since going public. Here's a revelatory clip from one of them on the Coast to Coast radio show where he specifically addresses this.
The AATIP name was created for a letter that Senator Reid sent in trying to establish a DOD SAP for our program for various reasons. And Lou used that name when he, and I guess it had to be in the time frame of 2012, and he used the name AATIP. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's fine. But there was a difference between the two programs. Ours had $22 million in funding, his had zero. But he did his thing, we did ours. But I can say that we were the only game in town.
So what did Lue Elizondo actually do? You know, the guy who everyone refers to as the director of AATIP, the Pentagon UFO program?
Lue Elizondo, former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Lue Elizondo ran the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program.
The man who ran that secret program, Lue Elizondo, thank you for joining us.
Was he even involved in the official Pentagon program at all? In the 221-page book about the Pentagon UFO program, Elizondo appears one time. That's a bit strange, right? One time, at a 2009 dinner, sitting at a table with members of AAWSAP and BASS, where the authors claim he was telling war stories about his psychic powers. That's it. Well, Elizondo himself has stated multiple times on the record that he had nothing to do with AAWSAP, including this emphatic tweet, which says, "It's been brought to my attention that despite my constant assertion in the media about my non-involvement in AAWSAP, some are under the false impression that I was part of it. For the record, again and again, I was not part of AAWSAP." Elizondo instead says he was in charge of the Pentagon's AATIP program, which I think we've established probably didn't even exist. Insiders say it was not an official program. It was a completely separate small initiative, a small unofficial effort, not a program as the P in AATIP suggests, but more in his spare time, when his normal day job allowed, he looked for UFOs. There are two pieces of documentation that further supports this. One is an email from the year 2020, released via the Freedom of Information Act to John Greenwald. In it, Elizondo is challenging the Pentagon press office regarding their statements denying his role with AATIP. Elizondo concedes that his AATIP could be defined more as simply an activity versus an actual program. The second is an annual Pentagon evaluation of Elizondo from the year 2016. It outlines all his officially assigned responsibilities at the Pentagon, none of which have to do with UFOs or anything called AATIP. So with all that in mind, let's look again at the Pentagon's official statement regarding Elizondo. That appears to be a true statement. In April 2022, Brian Bender, the author of the original 2017 Politico article, tweeted that he now feels like he was purposely misled by numerous sources on what AATIP really was and wasn't. In response to a Twitter user stating, "Seems clear that they wanted to gloss over the paranormal stuff, which is like where all the money really went," Bender replied, 100%. They buried the origin story because they were afraid it would be perceived as an utter waste of taxpayer money. It would have also further soured the whole effort, given the Bigelow connection to Harry Reid. It was a pork project to investigate voodoo that morphed into UFOs. And regarding myself and all the Basement Office episodes I've made about AATIP and Elizondo, I was apparently wrong. It wasn't intentional, but in an honest attempt to report the truth about the Pentagon UFO program, I too feel like I was purposely misled. As for Elizondo, he, along with other former members of Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy, have been lobbying Congress to spend more money on UFOs. They say the original New York Times article continues to influence congressional leaders, since many of the paranormal aspects weren't included in that story. Chris Mellon, the guy who once stood in front of a gigantic photo of a blurry party balloon, admits that telling Congress about AAWSAP would be counterproductive. Their efforts appear to have paid off. Congressional leaders like Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Marco Rubio helped create a new UFO program at the Pentagon. The new program is called the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. And another domino falls. I'm gonna leave you with one more thing. Lue Elizondo said he had nothing to do with AAWSAP. Nothing to do with the werewolves and ghosts and goblins. Nothing to do with AAWSAP. However, in May 2021, Elizondo filed a complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. Written in his own words, signed with his signature, Elizondo's complaint accuses some at the Pentagon of smearing his reputation by releasing statements denying his involvement as director of AATIP. In his complaint, which I obtained a copy of,
He outlines, in detail, each and every role he claims to have had from 2008 to 2017. In 2008, he says he joined James Lacatski on AAWSAP. His role was, in his words, AAWSAP's Chief of Counterintelligence and Security. From 2008 to 2010, Elizondo describes his various duties with AAWSAP, including reviewing incoming reports from BASS. In April 2010, he writes, Dr. Lacatski approached me and asked if I would consider assuming the role of AAWSAP and AATIP director. And in May 2010, he says his new role was director for AATIP and AAWSAP. I think we should stop and ask ourselves, how did we get here? What stories brought us here? Who told those stories? Are we closer to the truth? Or are we further away? Perhaps to find the answer, instead of waiting for the next domino to drop, maybe there's only one thing left to do. A true story will stand the test of time. Change one thing, and it can look completely different, like something else altogether. If you went back and refollowed the evidence, would the story sound the same? Would it look the same? Would you see something different, something new, something that was always right there, right in front of you? You are here at the beginning. Over the next few episodes, we will go back to re-examine and reassess the other fantastic claims of this UFO story. The only question is, where will this new journey take us? So, let's begin. There is a place, buried inside American folklore, which is supposedly home to every scary thing you could possibly imagine. UFOs, poltergeists, werewolves. When you follow the current UFO story, and the cast of characters within, follow it all the way back to the beginning. You will end up at Skinwalker Ranch. Nick, welcome back to the basement office.
Thanks, it's great to be back here.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about Skinwalker Ranch. But before we do, I want to acknowledge where I am as an investigator, a journalist, someone who's been looking at UFOs throughout the show. And I have to say, Nick, I am a little bit more skeptical now. I've had doubts, and anyone who's followed me on social media is fully aware of this. I've veered recently into a more skeptical realm.
I totally get that, and I'm not saying that I haven't been there myself. I think you start off, as you say, captivated by this. How could you not be? But eventually, yeah, you start to ask some rather more pointed questions, and there's a kind of moment, a sort of, wait a minute moment.
Right.
And you've obviously hit that.
I think in this field with ufology, it's easy to look around you at what's happening, the new news that's breaking, the new revelations that are coming out. Where is this all heading? That kind of thing. Where are we going? Where's this all heading? And I think recently I turned around and looked back. Where have we come from and why? What set us on this path, the path we're currently on? And I think the path we're currently on all started, for the most part, at Skinwalker Ranch. What is Skinwalker Ranch?
Skinwalker Ranch is a 500-acre property in Utah which has been described as a paranormal Disneyland, a place where apparently all sorts of strange things happen. UFO sightings, poltergeist activity, werewolf-like creatures. The list goes on. This is sort of a ground zero for the paranormal.
Paranormal Disneyland sounds awesome. I mean, I would totally pay VIP prices to go to that version of Disneyland. Skinwalker Ranch is an actual ranch and has been for decades, many decades. And, you know, I lived in Utah for 6 years. And I remember I wasn't there more than a few months before I first heard the tales, the urban legends. I knew nothing about Skinwalker Ranch, hadn't heard about Skinwalker Ranch when I moved to Utah. And I was in a pub and a group of friends were like, hey, have you ever heard of the Skinwalkers? And I was like, what are you talking about? No. And they said, in this particular version of the urban legend, they said, well, the Skinwalkers down in southern Utah, you'll be driving at night and suddenly these white-skinned, bright white-skinned, like half man, half wolf creatures will run up next to your, on two legs, run up next to your vehicle. No matter how fast you're going, they will keep pace and run next to your vehicle. And I was just like, what are people talking about, this Skinwalker thing? So what is a Skinwalker itself? What is a Skinwalker?
Well, a Skinwalker is part of Native American mythology and belief. And it comes from mainly the Navajo culture, but the Ute tribe, which is indigenous to the particular area, have those same beliefs. And the Skinwalker is essentially a malevolent witch, an individual who has various supernatural powers, and those powers include the ability to transform, to shapeshift. And this is common in various beliefs, I mean, around the world, but these Skinwalkers can apparently cast spells, do various magic, and are generally thought to be malevolent.
And we should note that in the area of Skinwalker Ranch, there are 2 Native American reservations. And the folklore coming in and out of those reservations permeates through the local cities and towns and also throughout the state. So those stories of the malevolent shape-shifting witch have been around for a long time.
The whole problem that you get with oral history, given that pre-contact Native Americans didn't have a written language, it's very difficult. So you get almost like a game of telephone, and you try and kind of go back and what did these people really believe in the past? Could some of it simply be the shaman figure in the tribe wearing, as some of them apparently do, like wolf pelts?
So that's the history about this area of Skinwalker Ranch. And the ranch itself was owned by the Meyers family for decades. Various members of the Meyers family lived on the ranch for many, many years, at least 60 years. And then they sell the ranch to the Sherman family, Gwen and Terry Sherman. Now, the Meyers family, for decades and generations, owned this location, owned this ranch, and never once see a UFO, report a UFO, see anything weird, see anything paranormal, nothing. They sell it to Terry and Gwen Sherman, and bam. Terry's talking about UFOs, strange things on the property, and a local newspaper, the Deseret News, writes an article about the ranch and this guy's alleged sightings. And a millionaire in another state, in Nevada, reads this story and says, I need that ranch. I need to go there and I need to figure out what's going on. I want to see these UFOs. And that millionaire was Robert Bigelow. Who is Robert Bigelow?
Robert Bigelow is somebody who has been at the center of UFO studies for many years. He made his money in real estate, but two of his other passions in life are the quest to discover what happens after death and UFOs. And with UFOs, maybe the paranormal more generally. And he has a history with this. He has set up, over the years, multiple organizations into which he has put, initially, his own money to study UFOs and the paranormal.
And, you know, Robert Bigelow went on, the Joe Rogan show and talked about his life and how he's always been into UFOs. Ever since he was a child, it's been this fascination of his. And he's almost like the Howard Hughes of UFOs, like he's this guy who made a lot of money doing, unrelated businesses and then uses that money for his real passion. And yes, so Robert Bigelow goes to the ranch, Terry and Gwen Sherman's ranch, and buys it. He creates the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, otherwise known as NIDS, and for the sole purpose of doing scientific studies of things like what was happening at the ranch here. What is NIDS and how big a role did it play in ufology at this time?
NIDS is, I think, very important. It was, as you say, funded by Robert Bigelow's money, so it could do things that maybe civilian UFO groups before hadn't been able to do. I mean, here was a guy writing the checks, and so if you want to bring in scientific equipment to capture high-resolution images, you could do that. Here was somebody who was prepared to underwrite this, but the other critical thing is that he was able to gather around him a group of individuals who, I think some of them were already predisposed to believe in things like this, but people with a backstory, people with connections, people in the government, the military, the intelligence community. So this was an attempt to take studies of UFOs and the paranormal to the next level.
Included on Bigelow's NIDS team were people like Hal Puthoff, who had spent decades researching psychic powers, both for the government in operations like the CIA's Project Stargate, and for the Church of Scientology, where he achieved the church's highest spiritual level. Puthoff had also worked with Uri Geller, who claims he can bend spoons with his mind. Puthoff was convinced Geller's psychic powers were real. Also on the NIDS team was John Alexander, a former Army intelligence officer who sought out how to harness the power of the paranormal for military applications. Alexander is featured in the critically acclaimed nonfiction book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, a true story about how the military performed a series of tests in which they attempted to kill goats simply by staring at them. And Jacques Vallée, a world-renowned UFO researcher who believes UFOs are not extraterrestrial, but multidimensional, originating from unseen dimensions of space-time. Vallée was Steven Spielberg's main inspiration for the French scientist in his film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
1 year after Bigelow purchases the ranch, the Deseret News, the same local paper, does a follow-up story where they talk to people who were working at the ranch for Bigelow. And the headline is, "No UFOs so far, 1 year in." And they were like, yeah, we haven't seen anything yet. Like, the people who were there, they'd been there a year and were speaking to the press about how they hadn't seen anything, hadn't experienced anything, no UFOs, like nothing. And this was a year already into it. Nothing had happened yet. They hadn't seen anything. And so if you're following along, 60 years of no UFOs, the new owners are there like a month, and they're suddenly, oh, they see UFOs. Bigelow buys the ranch of them because he's into UFOs, and then 1 year, no UFOs.
In his published diaries, Jacques Vallée notes a complete lack of UFOs on the ranch. On January 12, 1997, 3 NID staffers told Vallée expectations of frequent sightings of UFOs at the Utah ranch have not materialized. So what are we supposed to work on? On May 3, 1997, Vallée wrote, "It must be noted that no UFO is being seen at the ranch, in contrast with earlier claims." And on January 11, 1998, he states, "The Utah ranch is quiet, with no new incidents. There hasn't been a single new case of a physical UFO there." And in 1999, Robert Bigelow is quoted in the press saying he still has not personally seen any UFOs, joking that anytime he comes to the ranch, the UFOs stay away.
And then everything, no more talking to the press. Years go by. Apparently they're still at the ranch investigating. And then in 2005, this book comes out where it's like 280 pages worth of just the craziest stuff ever.
Written by NID scientist Colm Kelleher and paranormal journalist George Knapp, Hunt for the Skinwalker claims to be the chilling true story of unexplained phenomena on Utah's Skinwalker Ranch.
The book itself is a tell-all book of what they found, what they experienced at the ranch. And it is werewolves. It is poltergeist activity, UFOs, cattle mutilations. It reads like a science fiction horror film. And there is no appendix, no photos, no documents, just stories.
Lots of stories. Stories about Bigfoot-type monsters. Literal flying saucers landing in the backyard. Flying saucers and Bigfoot at the same time. Poltergeist hauntings. Ghostly voices of the dead. Hairy humanoids. People shooting guns at UFOs and the bullets ricocheting off the metal body of the spaceship. Quote, aliens, end quote. Interdimensional portals opening up and creatures crawling out of them. Ape-like creatures, reptilian creatures, beast creature, and a bulletproof wolf creature that couldn't be killed no matter how many times they shot it. But no evidence of any kind to back up any of these stories has ever been presented. George Knapp, who's built an entire career around stories of UFOs and the paranormal, and who was one of the authors of the Hunt for the Skinwalker book, was asked about evidence on The Joe Rogan Show.
Because they weren't there with cameras.
Is there any evidence?
Like for the first 20 months when the rancher is there, they don't have any evidence because he's not a paranormal investigator.
At this point, Knapp begins telling more stories about UFOs on and near the ranch. Rogan then interrupts and asks again.
Is there any evidence?
No, not really.
Oh.
If you're looking for physical evidence and solid proof, and they don't have it.
Oh.
Knapp saying there's no proof or evidence is quite strange, considering the book Knapp co-authored says this: "We obtained an intriguing body of physical evidence to support many of the accounts described in the book." Okay, so where is that intriguing body of physical evidence? Like, if you were in possession of the best proof that we're not alone, there's another dimension, ghosts exist, there's life after death, wouldn't you not take that to bigger and better and louder organizations beyond just a book for sale?
I would, yeah, absolutely. I suppose the issue might be, does the paranormal allow itself to fall within the framework of the scientific method in terms, for example, of repeatability? Or is it not, I don't want to say nebulous, but more random, abstract, something that would make it very difficult to write it up in a way that could get into science or nature? And a lot of people would say the answer to that question is yes. There is a sort of randomness about it, but also, and this is something that goes back to ideas of Native American folklore and other things, the trickster aspect of the phenomenon more generally. I mean, almost every culture has the concept of a trickster god. And some people say that the paranormal itself displays a lot of that. It's like it's toying with you. It dangles evidence in front of you, and just as you think you're going to get it, it snatches it away.
So we're dealing with Loki.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue.
On my way down to coordinate search and rescue.
I mean, honestly, how do you keep your food shut up?
But in reality, while all that may sound fun and weird, again, no evidence at all has been provided of any such trickster or skinwalker or even Loki. Since this part of the Skinwalker story occurred now many decades ago, a lot of the early key witnesses have since passed away. But we are lucky that a record of their testimonies was documented by an objective source completely outside the Bigelow circle and uninvolved with Skinwalker Ranch. Frank Salisbury, a botanist with a PhD in plant physiology and geochemistry, wrote and published several books on plants and flowers. But stuck in the middle of his resume is a 1974 book he wrote titled The Utah UFO Display, a biologist's report. In 2010, he released a second edition of the book, this time including the Skinwalker story and new candid interviews with Meyers and Sherman family members regarding whether the Meyers family ever experienced UFOs or anything paranormal on the ranch during the 60 years they owned it. Garth Meyers told Salisbury, "There were never any signs of that. There was nothing, unequivocally, absolutely nothing. There were no UFOs." Salisbury also interviewed Terry Sherman, who again purchased the ranch from the Meyers, claimed to have seen UFOs, and then sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow for $200,000. Sherman was then hired by Bigelow to help with the Skinwalker Ranch investigation, and Sherman's experiences are a major portion of the Hunt for the Skinwalker book. Salisbury assumed, logically, that since Sherman's detailed accounts of paranormal activity are all over the book, that he had been extensively interviewed for the book. But as it turns out, Sherman didn't even know a book was being written about his family's experiences until the book was published. And he had never met George Knapp, although they had talked on the phone, but not about the book. Sherman basically supports Garth Meyers' version of the history of the ranch. So where did the exaggerated version, the ranch as the center of UFO activity, come from? Well, that's a great question for the book's authors, Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, both of whom would not return multiple requests from me for comment. The 2005 release of Hunt for the Skinwalker catapulted the ranch's popularity on a national scale. Despite the ranch being closed to the public and guards prohibiting unauthorized entry, UFO believers would drive many hours just to sit outside the ranch's closed gates, hoping to see something. Many truly believed Robert Bigelow and his team of investigators at the National Institute of Discovery Sciences had discovered something that would change the course of human history forever.
Now, what happens with NIDS? What's the ultimate fate of the National Institute Discovery Sciences, the same organization that made all these amazing discoveries? What's their ultimate fate?
The plug gets pulled.
Okay, so they shut it down.
They shut it down. Now, you could say there are two schools of thought about why you would shut it down.
Okay.
One is that you didn't find anything, but two is you found what you were looking for.
Okay. And
then you don't need to search anymore.
Okay, but then you do what? You do what with that? Oh, we found it, we found it. Now we have to write a book and sell it for $20 on Amazon. Like what? What do you do with that?
The answer is apparently nothing. In 2004, in an announcement on the NIDS website, Bigelow stated his reason for shutting down active investigations at Skinwalker Ranch was simply nothing was happening at Skinwalker Ranch. We have not had the need to do any major investigative work for well over 2.5 years. It is unfortunate that there isn't more activity, as there was in the past, that warrants investigation. However, he added, should substantial activity occur with a need for investigation, the NIDS will be reactivated with new personnel. Skinwalker Ranch was dead. The stories of aliens, werewolves, and ghosts had stopped. The scientists at the ranch packed their bags and left, leaving behind a giant mystery. But this story was far from over. In 2007, a scientist working at the Pentagon picked up Hunt for the Skinwalker, and he read it cover to cover. He was captivated, and he believed the stories could actually be true. And that's when this story really gets weird.
What happens is a scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency named James Lacatski reads this book. James Lacatski at the DIA reads this book, is shocked, and he writes Robert Bigelow a letter. I, in my capacity as a DIA official, want to visit your ranch.
He goes to the ranch with Robert Bigelow and sees something himself, has an experience. He sees in the kitchen what I guess you could only describe as some sort of form, some shape, some weird translucent kind of phenomena right in front of him, in the room. And even Robert Bigelow, the seasoned believer, or somebody who I think we'd all say, I want to believe, and does believe, he doesn't see it. But Lacatski, the government, the intelligence community scientist, he says that he saw this thing, and the nearest estimate of what this thing looked like is if you look at the cover of the old Mike Oldfield album, Tubular Bells, a structure like that.
Now, Lacatski goes back to DC. Bigelow, a longtime friend of Senator Harry Reid, a longtime friend and financial supporter of Senator Harry Reid, contacts Harry Reid and says, hey, this DIA guy is interested in the ranch. Reid then meets with James Lacatski. Because of that meeting, it is decided that, Reid decides something needs to be done about this. We should investigate this officially. We should officially investigate the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch. Working with Senator Reid, James Lacatski would then write the scope and objectives of an official Pentagon program called the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, or AAWSAP. According to Reid, Lacatski intentionally left out any mentions of UFOs, Skinwalker Ranch, or anything paranormal. Because of this, AAWSAP appeared to just be a normal aerospace technology program. Senator Reid acquired $22 million to fund the program. The AAWSAP contract was then put out in the public domain for solicitation. According to the law, any company could bid on it, and the company with the best proposal would win the contract. You would think military contractors, energy contractors, technology contractors would eat this up. It's millions of dollars. They want us to study technology or military stuff. Oh, we're perfect for that. We'll bid on that. Another company, oh, that's perfect for us. We'll bid on that. Energy company says that's perfect for us. We're going to bid on that. How many companies bid on this?
One company bid on that.
Who owned that company?
Robert Bigelow.
The AAWSAP contract and the $22 million was indeed awarded to the sole bidder, Robert Bigelow, and his new company, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. Supported by government money and a government contract, BASS would spend the next 2 years not just hunting UFOs around the world, but also chasing monsters and ghosts at Skinwalker Ranch. For years, James Lacatski, the Pentagon director of the AAWSAP program, remained a mystery. He did no interviews with the press. He released no statements. Then, in October 2021, he finally stepped out of the shadows to tell his story. Lacatski teamed up with the authors of the first Skinwalker book, Colm Kelleher, the BASS project manager, and George Knapp, a journalist and close Bigelow associate. Together, they wrote and released a new book titled Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. They claim the book tells the true story of the Pentagon's AAWSAP program and reveals what $22 million of taxpayer money was spent on. In the new book, the same spooky things from the first book return. Werewolves, ghosts, Bigfoot, and of course, flying saucers. But this time, in the sequel, a new, sinister force arises. One of the most striking, jaw-dropping allegations they make about what happened at Skinwalker Ranch, this phenomena, is this malevolent, evil poltergeist that affects the health, affects people's health, their immune system, and attacks you. A poltergeist presence that follows people from the ranch to their homes in whatever state.
The hitchhiker.
The hitchhikers, they call them the hitchhiker, these hitchhiking poltergeists that follow you wherever you go and harm you. There's a story of a guy goes home from Skinwalker and it's attacking his son. It's affecting his wife. And they refer to it as an infectious agent. They refer to this poltergeist as like a pathogen, almost. And, right here, infectious agent model. And then they bring up COVID-19. This is from the book, just as the Wuhan Institute of Virology or the wet markets in China may have been the source of COVID-19, could Skinwalker Ranch be the source of an infectious agent? And they're comparing it to COVID. Nick, if you were to experience an outbreak of something's happening, there appears to be an outbreak of some sort, who are you contacting?
I'm calling the CDC.
I called the CDC. They don't know what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to Skinwalker. No one's ever picked up the phone and called the CDC. You call the CDC. You don't write a book for 1995. You don't write a book to say there's an infectious agent affecting the health of people. They're talking about infections, transmissible, outbreak. You don't call the CDC. you don't pick up the phone.
It's a perfectly legitimate point, and I agree with you on it. I think the COVID-19 analogy was unfortunate, to say the least. And yeah, I go back to my point. If there is data relating to some sort of pathogen, then write it up for a peer-reviewed medical journal. Or as you say, go to the CDC.
Call 911. If it's harming human beings, and literally in here, someone saw I went home and it hurt my son. If it is real, make it real. Sound the alarms. The logic makes no sense. If outbreak equals call CDC is a very basic line of logic, and that apparently doesn't happen here.
No, it doesn't, and that is a big problem in terms of evidence. As I say, I think it's unfortunate. I think it's meant more as analogy. Some people go to the ranch and see nothing. Some people have an experience. Some people apparently take something back with them. But then you get into a whole nother debate about individual perception. Are some people, if there is a phenomenon, whatever the true nature of this phenomenon, are some people able to perceive it while others can't?
One thing's for sure, one group of people who are not able to perceive the phenomena are the readers of this book, which again contains no visual evidence to support any of these supposed paranormal encounters. Which is a shame, because the Skinwalker investigators say they had a variety of cameras with them when they stumbled upon the book's now most infamous cryptid monster, the Dino Beaver. And they literally write in the book, we set out with all of our scientific gear, but especially our cameras. We took our cameras with us. And he literally writes, our sole purpose was to capture a visual. And then like a page later, they're like, and then the cryptid monster showed up. And then the cryptid monster showed up, and then they write about this thing, and they're like, oh my God. And then like the next page, they're like, oh God damn it, we forgot to take a picture.
Obviously, they were in shock.
The Skinwalker investigators described the creature as being the size of a large pig, with dinosaur-like spines on its back, and a very large flattened beaver tail. They say the monster was ambling towards them. Ambling means to walk at a slow pace. It's not like it zipped by them too fast. They say they had cameras, yet no one takes a photo? These are the worst scientists in the world.
I'm not saying this
by the way.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is what happened, but I will just pull out from the UFO literature some reports which I have come across myself of UFO witnesses who literally have a camera around their neck, see a huge UFO up close and personal, and either because they are in shock or because, and this is deep conspiracy, but there is some sort of spooky extraterrestrial mind control device that prevents us taking good photos of them.
No, that's not true. That's not what's happening at all. And the difference is, Nick, is that these are a group of scientists who literally said, we went out expecting to see, we went out prepared to see, we went out with the goal to see and capture an image of this thing, and then they see it, and then they're like, God damn it, we forgot to get a picture.
If there is some sort of either extraterrestrial or phenomenological thing that means that witnesses are affected in some way, it's going to work on scientists too.
A week after the dinosaur beaver sighting, one of the same investigators encountered a gigantic bird that looked like an oversized owl, which literally attacked her car. The authors state the attack left scrapes and gouges in the paint of her car. No visual evidence of the scratched car is provided. A month later, The same investigator claims a poltergeist threw 2 wine bottles across a room, smashing them against a wall. No visual evidence of the broken bottles is provided. And later, the same investigator claims to have seen spooky orbs of light in her home and black shadow-like figures in her room. Again, no evidence. But how does one prove that? I mean, if you're a paranormal investigator and spooky events keep happening in your home, wouldn't you do what the people in Paranormal Activity did, which is set up cameras literally everywhere? But of course, this never happens, and the reader is provided with nothing but words on a page. And while the words and stories seem like a thrilling adventure, the stories not included in the book shed some light on what was going on behind the scenes. Researcher Mark Cicciotti released this article featuring on-record statements from former employees who worked for Bigelow at Skinwalker. I also spoke to some of these sources, who worked as security officers and investigators at the ranch. Their testimony is that Bigelow did not like asking them what happened today or what happened this week and hearing nothing or not much. He would get frustrated and angry. And these are people who are collecting a paycheck, this is their job. And the boss has established he's happy when weird stuff happens and only when weird stuff happens. And so an exact quote from an ex-employee is, just tell him what he wants to hear. When he asks what happened, just tell him what he wants to hear.
I've certainly heard the skeptical argument that, if there is a billionaire funding research who believes in UFOs and the paranormal, you don't want to be the one who turns around and says to him, you know what, there's nothing here.
Yeah, you don't want to be the guy to tell the billionaire that he's wasting his money.
Because then he pulls the plug.
Right.
And you're out of a job.
Bigelow's headquarters was in Las Vegas, 400 miles from Skinwalker, and he would only rarely visit the ranch himself. Full-time workers at the ranch say they were supposed to fax daily reports to him, but according to those who worked at the ranch 24/7, a lot of those reports were embellished, or simply not true. They claim one individual, while drunk, would make up spooky stories and fax them to Bigelow. Stories such as witnessing a man turn into a wolf. We had a few people who tried to make stuff up in order to please Mr. Bigelow. I remember hearing rumors when I was first hired that a bonus would be given out if anyone provided actual evidence to an event. This, of course, created a problem. Yes, some people embellish stories. They never attempted to debunk anything, ever. They would see a goddamn raccoon and assume it's paranormal. Everything, and I mean everything, had a logical, rational, reasonable explanation that Mr. Bigelow just didn't want to hear about. This very questionable scientific investigation was not limited to those who worked at Skinwalker Ranch. In 2010, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, printed an announcement in their newsletter declaring a former collaboration between the university's nuclear materials group and BASS. Via Colm Kelleher, BASS would send various materials to the university, and Dr. Thomas Hartman would analyze them. In 2020, Dr. Hartman went on the record to researcher Mark Cicciotti about what kinds of materials he was getting from Dr. Kelleher, and what it was that Dr. Kelleher was hoping to find. Dr. Hartman says Kelleher was looking for aliens. The basic idea of Colm Kelleher was to identify traces of alien life, so he provided us with some spheres, which turned out to be ion exchange beads, or a rock sample with traces of hydraulic fluid, which didn't turn out alien as well. Further, we analyzed some brown liquid in a plastic bottle, but it was just muddy water. I hope this provides some ideas about the level of research Mr. Kelleher was addressing us with. I agree that this is not much scientific. So, This is another insight into the level, in my opinion, amateur hour level of scientific rigidity at Skinwalker Ranch. A collection of random stuff, sending it pro bono to a science professor who then in turn delegates it to his students. They were analyzing these materials, and they were rocks, creek water, mud, pieces of burnt wood. But according to Colm Kelleher and those at Skinwalker, they thought it could be alien stuff from aliens.
In Colm Kelleher's defense, I would say, if he genuinely believes this is alien, isn't sending it for scientific analysis exactly the right thing to do?
To college students?
No, well, you send it to a professor will often delegate to students. I mean, they're still following the same method. I don't think you can fault Colm Kelleher for saying, I think I've found something interesting, I'll get some scientists to test it.
Muddy water, rocks, and burnt wood that you think, someone says, I think this might be alien. I'm looking for evidence of extraterrestrial origins here. Can you test this creek water? And I think it's couched in that mystique of Skinwalker. Yeah. If you are a believer in that already, that this is a hot spot for paranormal activity, you already have the notion that if you find something curious at the ranch, that it's going to have something paranormal to do with it. There is no doubt that Colm Kelleher already believes in the poltergeist stuff, in the wolf stuff, and all of this stuff. Why? Because he wrote books and he says so. Like, he believes it. And that, do you agree that preconceived beliefs could cloud your scientific ambitions?
Absolutely. And it's clear in many ways that this was a believer program set up by a believer faction. I don't think that's disputed, or if it is, it shouldn't be. If you look, you will find, particularly if you look with a believer mindset.
Dr. Hartman at the University of Nevada was not the only one not impressed by Bass. In 2009, the Pentagon determined the AAWSAP reports submitted by Bass were of limited value. The Pentagon pulled the program's funding, and by 2012, the program was officially dead. At this point, Robert Bigelow decided he was done with Skinwalker Ranch. On literally April Fool's Day in 2016, Bigelow sold the ranch to another real estate millionaire searching for the paranormal, Brandon Fugal. And while Bigelow was very secretive about the ranch and never allowed the public to see behind its gates, Fugal has brought in the History Channel to produce a reality TV show called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch.
This is the most unique science project of its kind. Some of the most disturbing, unexplained events have occurred on this property.
That sounds exciting and maybe even a little bit scary, right?
Right.
Fugal claims he was once a skeptic of Skinwalker and didn't necessarily believe the spooky stories from the Bigelow days. But he says all this changed when he himself had a paranormal experience at the ranch. He now believes something is there, something real, something bizarre and extraordinary.
The reality of the anomalies that are occurring on the property really all combine to tell us that what we are dealing with at Skinwalker Ranch is absolute reality.
He is so confident that something otherworldly is occurring at the ranch that he has opened the gates to a very vocal skeptic and said, "Come to the ranch and see for yourself." I'm setting up camp in front of Homestead 2, which, according to the scientists and people who work here, is one of the most haunted places on the ranch. I just heard a thump. Oh, I can see it. What is that? I'm spending the entire night by myself at Skinwalker Ranch.
here's Homestead 2. I'm gonna walk around. There are lots and lots of stories about this particular place. So this is the doorway where they said the temperature dropped and all that stuff happened. So let's go ahead and go in. Where does that sound come from? What was that? I heard a thump over here. So this is creepy. Did you hear that? Right here. So over there, I heard a thump. And I just heard it again. I swear to God, I keep hearing it. What?
Skinwalker Ranch is a 500-acre property in eastern Utah. It's also supposedly one of the most haunted places on Earth. For 20 years, the ranch was owned by Robert Bigelow, a real estate millionaire obsessed with the paranormal. Bigelow claimed the ranch was a hotspot for UFOs, poltergeists, and all kinds of monsters. But no evidence to support any of this has ever been presented. In 2016, Bigelow sold the ranch to another real estate millionaire with a passion for the paranormal, Brandon Fugal. And Fugal claims to finally have the goods. Proof. Evidence. He produces a reality TV show on the History Channel called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. It claims to show real paranormal phenomena, proving that the spooky legends of the ranch are actually true. I reached out to Brandon Fugal and asked if I could come to the ranch and see this evidence for myself. I was surprised when he enthusiastically accepted. He said I could come to the ranch, that he would show me everything, and that he would answer all my questions. So I got on a plane, and my journey began. I fly to Salt Lake City, Utah, a city I used to live in. Brandon Fugal tells me that before I can go to Skinwalker Ranch, he needs to show me some things first. He says there's a whole backstory that I need to hear before I can fully understand the ranch. So I drive 45 minutes down the I-15 to the city of Provo, another city I used to live in.
Hey! How's it going? Good to see you.
Welcome back to Provo.
Yeah.
So much has changed, hasn't it?
It really has, yeah. It's like the Batmobile.
Yeah, this is my daily driver. This is that kind of Ferrari that I swap out.
You know, it makes sense that someone who owns Skinwalker Ranch would drive this.
It's crazy. I'm just a 17-year-old stuck in a 49-year-old body, so this was kind of the car I had on my wall.
Brandon says being the owner of Skinwalker Ranch only takes up 5% of his day, and he wants to show me his real job. The landscape of the valley surrounding Salt Lake City is changing. Brand new buildings are popping up everywhere. And a lot of these buildings all have something in common. Brandon Fugal. His name is posted on signs up and down the Salt Lake Valley.
I noticed your name all over the signs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's your name right over there.
Yeah.
Brandon takes me up to an overlook. Every new building in the valley below us is part of his real estate empire.
So you did this one, this one, this one.
That one. This is why I work 18 to 20 hours a day.
Over the next 3 hours, we drive from building to building, building to building. All new construction. Brandon's name in the front. Fugal is the chairman of Colliers International, the #1 commercial real estate company in the state of Utah.
Colliers, as one of the top 3 global players, manages 2 billion square feet of commercial space globally.
Hey Pete, how's it going? Congratulations on our closing, bro.
I have never worked with a more talented, harder working, more charismatic real estate genius in the world. Is that true?
Yeah,
Yes,
no.
it is. Yes,
He's
it is
preaching
true.
false doctrine.
It's hard not to be impressed. He is, without a doubt, an extremely successful real estate magnate. Brandon avoids discussing his vast wealth, but online financial websites estimate his net worth is around $450 million. And while that's about $450 million more than my net worth, I learned that I actually do have a few things in common with him. We both were born and raised in the Mormon religion. We were both Mormon missionaries. And we both attended Utah Valley University, except his name is now on a building, and mine's not.
This is the newly completed Brandon Fugal Gateway Administration Building. I recently donated $5 million in support of really the expansion of this incredible institution where I went to school.
We stop in Brandon's hometown of Pleasant Grove, where his uncle, Guy Fugal, is currently the mayor. And there's a Mormon church on nearly every corner. Brandon comes here every day to refill on gas and caffeine.
So how's it going?
Good, yourself?
Doing good. Just grabbing a Diet Mountain Dew as usual. I'm a bit of a germaphobe, so I try not to touch the knobs. But it's a mixture of Diet Mountain Dew with just a splash of Goji Citrus Strawberry. I start every day with a 52 ounce of Diet Mountain Dew. I drink about 200 to 300 ounces a day of this stuff, and Friends is my hometown gas station. I've been going here since I was a little boy. Hey, Nairi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good, you?
Let's put this on my tab.
Okay, sounds good.
And you can attest, am I here every day or not?
Every single day.
So like everyone knows your name in there.
Yeah. It's the center of gravity for Pleasant Grove Town here, where I've lived my whole life and grown up.
Why is a place like this important to you?
You know, roots are important to me. Heritage is important to me. And my family, you know, they were converts to the LDS Church and came from primarily Scandinavia, settled here in the 1860s, and this is home.
In 1820, a young boy in upstate New York named Joseph Smith claimed God and Jesus Christ physically appeared before him and told him that none of the world's religions were true, and that they were choosing him as their prophet to establish God's true religion. Over the next few years, Smith claimed angels visited him via interdimensional portals and provided him with a new religious text, the Book of Mormon. Smith called his new religion the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he eventually attracted over 2,000 followers. But in 1844, Joseph Smith was murdered by an angry anti-Mormon mob. Anti-Mormon sentiment grew, more Mormons were attacked and even killed. So Smith's successor, Brigham Young, led the Mormon pioneers out west. They traveled over 1,000 miles through harsh conditions to find refuge from violence and persecution. Their wagons and handcarts finally arrived at the Salt Lake Valley in Utah. And there, in the desert, they built a temple to their God and a city for their people. They proclaimed these are the latter days, the final days of conflict between God and the devil, angels and demons. Brandon Fugal's ancestors were part of this group of early Utah Mormons.
This is the old historic Fugal blacksmith shop. This was constructed in the 1890s by my great-grandfather. Next door, you have one of the older structures standing in town. My great-great-grandfather lived in a little underground dugout those first harsh winters here, and then they built this structure right on top of it in the 1860s.
Brandon, I have to admit, I had no idea your roots were everywhere here. You're far-reaching. We passed the cemetery just now, and one of the gravestones,
headstones.
Fugal.
It's all Fugal. My great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, even my father, who recently passed.
Up the hill from where his Mormon ancestors lived, Brandon shows me where he plans to build his fourth home. So right here, you're gonna build your future home.
Yeah, in the next few months.
He shows me architectural mock-ups of what the house will look like. Oh, that's what it's gonna look like?
This is gonna be the front we're gonna be looking at.
It's like a castle.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's right out of a fairy tale.
Right out of a fairy tale.
It's pretty extraordinary.
Brandon tells me he has a master plan for the patch of woods below.
I'm gonna have the most terrifying haunted forest in the state every Halloween. In fact, I will have fog machines and strobe lights. I plan on making it so terrifying that it'll make children cry, but they'll get full-size candy bars out of it. Oh, and I'm gonna totally have the Scooby-Doo factor with secret passageways, hidden staircases that I've already planned to build into it. Because you can't build a castle without having the Scooby-Doo factor, without having, trap doors and secret rooms, right?
Right. We end up in Salt Lake City, at Brandon's high-rise condo.
It's a nice convenience to have this as a splash pad to operate from.
How many splash pads do you have, Brandon?
A couple.
You have a couple?
So, yeah.
A couple splash pads.
So I just wing it, but I grew up writing music, and that was my passion. I was the only elementary school kid who knew the Close Encounters, the Close Encounters theme and all that stuff.
Do that again.
I'm a songwriter. I had bands, rock bands all through high school, and then I have a dark secret techno project called Supplicant.
The music video?
Yeah,
I've seen
that's
it.
funky.
Yes.
You've got, the alien head. This is actually a faithful licensed recreation from H.R. Geiger.
Yeah.
That's from Stargate. So this is one of the rings used on screen in the classic with James Spader, Kurt Russell.
So it's a movie prop?
It's a screen-used movie prop.
So it's safe to say that, you're a sci-fi fan.
Yeah. Love science fiction.
Brandon Fugal is a collector. His multiple offices are packed with movie and television memorabilia.
Can you guess what this wardrobe?
Yes, I do. That is from Unbreakable.
Yep.
And most of these are not replicas, but screenshot originals.
This is the Terminator jacket, screen worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger with the fake blood and the bullet holes.
These are the glasses worn by Tom Cruise in the original Mission Impossible.
He has Walter White's gas mask from Breaking Bad, the monkey head from Indiana Jones, part of Baby Superman's spaceship, Fox Mulder's FBI badge from The X-Files, the puzzle box from Hellraiser. He has so many items that I could produce an entire documentary on his collection alone.
In these drawers, let's see. Whoa,
you can't just show me an alien fetus and then close the door?
Yeah, you have a couple of interesting things in here.
He has 2 drawers full of authentic movie screenplays.
This is the final script for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Poltergeist.
Steven Spielberg.
Written by Steven Spielberg, first draft, 1981. You get the drift.
He also owns an incredible number of rare antique books. A King James Bible from the year 1611. An original printing of the works of Shakespeare from the year 1685.
In here is a first printing of The Christmas Carol, 1843. The Complete System of Magic, 1729. This is the history of Stonehenge that belonged to King Charles II.
Flying saucers have arrived.
Yeah.
The Book of the Damned. You got ghost stories.
Of an antiquary. Yep.
He also has an entire shelf of historical books and documents from the Mormon Church. Most of them are over 200 years old.
I have the Masonic guide belonging to the first Mormon bishop. He not only signed it, but he signed it in his Masonic cipher.
Behold, I am Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I came unto my own, and my own receiveth me not. I am the light which shineth in darkness, and darkness comprehendeth not.
I have what I believe to be the Holy Grail of Mormon history. So Oliver Cowdery, who is the principal scribe of the Book of Mormon.
And this is
his copy.
Is his copy.
This is his personal...
From the 1800s.
Yeah, 1837, Kirtland. He was the principal witness. Claimed to his death that he'd been visited by Peter, James, and John the Baptist. He's the only witness to the events at the pulpit of the Kirtland Temple dedicatory service where he claimed that Moses, Elijah, and Elias appeared. I think one of the most valuable pieces of church history. I can't think of anything I would trade this for, and it has 25 pages that bear his handwriting and his notations.
There is one more item in Brandon's collection, and it eventually leads us directly to Skinwalker Ranch.
You notice these strange objects. These are not movie props. These are what we call forced process gyroscopic mechanisms. These were constructed in conjunction with a private, confidential technology endeavor testing gravitational physics theories.
Anti-gravity.
Correct.
So you had these constructed to test an experiment with anti-gravity.
Correct. And what many believe to be the technology that would potentially drive or propel flying saucers.
Did you achieve anti-gravity?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Brandon sits me down and tells me that his path to buying Skinwalker Ranch started with a phone call in 1995 from one of his former Mormon missionary friends.
And he said, Brandon, you're in the business of selling office buildings, correct? You're in the commercial real estate business, you work with companies. And I said, yeah, of course.
Fugal's friend told him he knew a successful business executive who was looking for office space and asked if Brandon could help.
And I, of course, jumped out of my chair. I remember I was so excited. And I said, absolutely, I can help. So he passed on the number to me. He says, well, his name is Joe Firmage.
Joe Firmage was a senior vice president at Novell, a software company in the 90s. He's also a direct descendant of Mormon prophet Brigham Young. In 1995, during the dot-com bubble, he left Novell to become the founder of US Web, an interactive website design and consultancy company. Firmage needed office space for his new company. Brandon Fugal, a young real estate broker, provided that office space. US Web quickly became very successful, and Joe Firmage was the toast of Silicon Valley. In 1998, Firmage appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine, deemed one of the masters of the new internet universe. Also on the cover was Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Joe Firmage and his company US Web were rising stars, destined for greatness.
And then, at the height of their success, when they're in the midst of merging with a big global PR firm, agency, he does a story. Joe Firmage came out and said that, number one, in my spare time with my resources, I have learned that the UFO phenomena is real. Then he proceeds to say in this expose that he'd been visited by what he believed to be an alien being, and that he was going to bring the truth forward, and that the physics to enable breakthrough propulsion, travel to the stars, and also free energy was within our grasp.
Firmage's statements on aliens and UFOs caused a lot of embarrassment and controversy for US Web. He was removed as CEO and eventually left the company completely to hunt UFOs and experiment with the technology he believed an alien had given him. Over 10 years later, in 2009, Brandon Fugal was standing in his private airport hangar. He was wondering why there had been no breakthrough aerospace technologies since the invention of the jet engine in 1937.
In the most fundamental ways that we propel and even power our world, we're still dealing with technology that is very old and antiquated. It bothered me, and I became obsessed.
And then he remembered Joe Firmage.
I remembered Joe Firmage and the fact that he'd done this interview and had claimed that he was going to be investing in physics programs. And I thought, well, you know, maybe he has some insights.
Fugal says he contacted Firmage and had a meeting with him.
And I'm whisked into a garage where there are the equivalent of giant tinker toys, it looks like, spinning objects, mechanical, very rudimentary, crude mechanical devices that are being operated. And I see an older, bearded Joe Firmage.
Fugal says Firmage claimed to be on the cusp of inventing humanity-changing anti-gravity technology that would allow humans to travel to the stars.
He said, I believe that you've been led here for a reason. Right here in my garage before you, you are looking at the early proof of concept embodiments of the experiments showing the physics underpinning these new advancements.
Fugal says he was skeptical, but Firmage introduced Fugal to various people who would back up his claims.
He puts me on the phone with General Wesley Clark, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He introduces me to General Clark, says, General Clark, I'd like you to meet Brandon Fugal. You know, he needs to know that there's reality to this. You know, would you mind telling him your views? And General Clark said, yes, I don't have any problem. Great to meet you. You know, Mr. Fugal, I support Mr. Firmage. I've been following his work closely, and there's truth to it.
A representative for General Clark told me that while the general does not specifically remember this phone conversation with Fugal, he did indeed know Joe Firmage and was in fact interested in Firmage's claims of exotic technology.
So I'm blown away. Here I have former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, head of NATO command, who's confirming that Joe has been involved with credible activities, confirming that there's some reality.
Next, Firmage put Fugal on the phone with Hal Puthoff and Kit Green, two scientists who had previously worked with the CIA and had a long history of researching otherworldly topics like UFOs and psychic powers. They also vouched for Joe Firmage. This all happens back to back on the same day.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Wesley Clark, Hal Puthoff, Kit Green. So you had a series of phone calls.
Series of phone calls.
Puthoff and Green had long been involved with millionaire Robert Bigelow's hunt for the paranormal. And at the time of this phone call with Fugal in 2009, they were both involved in a now infamous $22 million Pentagon program headed by Bigelow. The program, among other things, allegedly investigated strange phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch, which at the time was owned by Robert Bigelow. Fugal's back-to-back phone conversations with General Clark, Hal Puthoff, and Kit Green, in which they all vouched for Joe Firmage and his endeavors, was enough to convince Fugal.
It completely changed my view of reality. It blew my mind.
Fugal converted his family's private airport hangar into a laboratory, a dedicated space where Firmage could experiment and build his world-changing technology. They created a company called Motion Sciences, and Fugal claims he spent millions of dollars on Firmage's work. These 2010 videos on Joe Firmage's YouTube page show various tests of his invention. Fugal appears in a few of them.
What we're working with is advanced propulsion technology that truly has not been released as of yet, and this patented technology and physics breakthrough is going to change the world as we know it.
This video appears to show a celebratory demonstration of Firmage's device. A happy-looking Fugal stands next to Hal Puthoff. But the smiles and celebrations soon went away. Fugal says it soon became apparent that there was no truth to Firmage's claims.
Within months, it became apparent that Mr. Firmage had some serious issues. The unfortunate truth was that there wasn't any validity to it.
Fugal and Firmage had a falling out. Motion Sciences eventually ceased operations and closed down. In a statement to me, Firmage says that while his invention was showing great progress, its potential was not realized. He claims to have since continued to work on his device, which he now calls the accelerometer, and will reveal it to the world in 2023. Firmage's devices, from 10 years prior, now sit on the bottom shelf of Fugal's sci-fi and fantasy movie collection.
It was disappointing and heartbreaking, and trust me, to lose that money, to lose years, to have the disappointment of family, at that point in time, I had lost a lot of faith and trust in people.
Fugal says this was a dark time for him, that he struggled to trust anyone, and even his faith in the Mormon Church was shaken. But this all changed with a phone call in 2015.
Late 2015, I receive a call from Dr. Hal Puthoff and Dr. Christopher C. Green, Kit Green.
The same two guys.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Just a few years after the Joe Firmage Motion Sciences debacle, Fugal says Hal Puthoff and Kit Green had a brand new proposition for him.
And in the middle of that call, both Dr. Puthoff and Dr. Green said, "Are you familiar with a certain piece of property in Utah known as Skinwalker Ranch? What do you know about Skinwalker Ranch?"
Fugal says Puthoff and Green told him that the ranch was for sale.
"We'd like to suggest that you take a meeting with Mr. Bigelow if you're interested. Would you be open to it?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Fugal flew to Las Vegas to meet with Robert Bigelow and discuss purchasing Skinwalker Ranch. Fugal says Bigelow would only sell the ranch as is, and that Bigelow would not be sharing with Fugal any of the research he had done at the ranch over the last 20 years.
I agreed. I said, "Okay, fine. I'll buy it as is."
On April Fool's Day 2016, Brandon Fugal became the official owner of Skinwalker Ranch. The next morning, I met Brandon at his private airport hangar in Provo, Utah. In the hangar were some of his luxury cars, his private jet, and his $6 million helicopter, which he uses to fly to Skinwalker Ranch. His brother, Cameron, is the helicopter's pilot.
So you're a believer? I'm a believer that there's something happening out there that we don't understand, and we may never totally understand it.
It was finally time to go. We took off towards Skinwalker Ranch. We flew over Brigham Young University, a school both Brandon and I once tried to get into, but failed.
We flew over the Missionary Training Center, where both Brandon and I had once prepared for our Mormon missions. We flew into Rock Canyon, where I used to hike many years ago, but I'd never seen it from this angle before. Brandon told me before I could go to Skinwalker Ranch, there was a whole backstory that he needed to tell me before I could fully understand the ranch. And now that he had, I think he was right. I thought of something that I hadn't considered before. These stories about the ranch, the visitors from another place, the evil spirits, voices of the dead. All of these stories had a new context. Maybe all this was part of a bigger story, a universal story, a tale, as they say, as old as time. Was Skinwalker Ranch just another story? Was it just another item in Brandon's science fiction collection? Or was it something else? Could some of this, despite my skepticism, actually be real? And if so, what was I in for? I was caught up in these thoughts as Skinwalker Ranch appeared on the horizon, and Brandon announced that we needed to say a prayer.
I'll be asking my brother Cameron, our pilot, to offer a prayer, asking for protection and really preparing ourselves.
Do you pray every time you come out here, before you come out here?
Every time.
Every time?
Every time. We're dealing with forces that are not only unknown and unexplained, but also have proven to be dangerous and malevolent.
The prayer that they offered was very similar to ones I heard growing up in the church.
Our dear God, Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity that we have to come out to Skinwalker Ranch today. We ask for thy protection and help to avoid any of the negative aspects of the ranch while we explore the sciences associated with it. We're grateful for the opportunity to explore this and to try to learn more about our planet, this universe, and all that was created. Please bless us this day and to protect the helicopter from any harm or danger, and also ourselves. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Welcome to Skinwalker Ranch, the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet.
I think you could say that acquiring Skinwalker Ranch was part of a religious journey, or at least my spiritual journey. I think most people on this planet at some time or another ask those long-standing questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? Is there a higher power? Is there a purpose to life? And I saw Skinwalker Ranch as a living laboratory where you could
find potentially some of the answers to those religious questions that so many people have.
Sure.
Right?
Or at least prove that we're not alone in the universe, or that our reality is not what it might seem.
Where does faith fit into that? Because with spiritual and religious beliefs, faith is believing that something exists without seeing it. You have faith that it's there, but you can't see it, you can't prove it. So how does faith fit into a place like Skinwalker where you want to know, you want to prove, you want to find?
People ask me all the time, do you consider yourself a believer? And my answer is that no, I'm not a believer, I'm an experiencer. I've actually experienced things on this ranch. I have witnessed things, I have data supporting what I believe to be the fact that there is something truly extraordinary happening.
Before I land at Skinwalker Ranch, you need to know something first. I'm only here because the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, Brandon Fugal, accepted my request to come. But that almost didn't happen. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch is an ongoing reality show on the History Channel. It documents the endeavors of scientists and investigators hunting for supposed paranormal activity on the ranch. One of those scientists, and arguably the star of the show, is Dr. Travis Taylor. Publicly, Taylor has been very critical of my previous reporting for the basement office. A few days before my visit, Brandon Fugal called me to say Travis Taylor didn't want me at the ranch, and he asked Fugal to cancel my trip. To his credit, Fugal said no to Taylor. "Bring it on," he said. "I'm not scared of anyone." So here I am, and here we go.
Hey, Bryan Arnold. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. This is Bryan Arnold, known by his nickname Dragon. He's the ranch chief security officer. On the History Channel show, he's often seen holding a gun. Not to shoot aliens, but to protect them against wild animals like mountain lions, or to arrest human trespassers, which they say they've had a few.
Stephen, I'd like to introduce you to Erik Bard, Principal Investigator.
My pleasure. This is Erik Bard, the ranch's principal investigator and chief scientist. A physicist and technical guru, Bard is behind the vast installation of the ranch's high-tech camera systems, monitoring devices, and other scientific equipment. On the show, he's often the first one to point out potential paranormal activity. And this is Thomas Winterton, the ranch's superintendent. He manages the maintenance and upkeep of the property and assists in the team's investigations. He claims to have had multiple paranormal encounters at the ranch. Also present was Caleb Bench, a former Marine and Sheriff's deputy. He's now a security officer at the ranch and is also featured on the show. Not present was Travis Taylor. I sit down with the Skinwalker crew and bring up the first thing on my mind. This place, you guys have been here for 6 years. The 20 years prior to that comes with a lot of history, written history. The books are right over there.
A lot of stories.
Yeah, Bigelow, but a lot of stories. For 20 years, the ranch's previous owner, Robert Bigelow, claimed the ranch was crawling with UFOs, ghosts, and all kinds of monsters. Bigelow Associates released 2 books full of stories about horrifying creatures that stalked the ranch, including a bulletproof werewolf that couldn't be killed, no matter how many times they shot it. So now that Brandon Fugal and his investigators have been there for 6 years, have they seen these things? Have you guys ever, any of you, seen such a creature?
I can only speak for myself personally, no.
No.
Have not.
We have no data under our investigation that supports that.
What about the half-dinosaur, half-beaver creature that the Bigelow team claimed to have seen at the ranch? Has the new Skinwalker crew ever seen the infamous dino beaver? Have you...
I have never seen...
I can't even ask the question. Have you ever seen a dino beaver?
No, I've never seen a dino beaver. I wouldn't even know what... That's an interesting name to come up with.
It sounds like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
And what about the Bigelow claims of UFOs and scary creatures coming out of interdimensional tunnels and portals? You've never seen a portal open up and a spaceship come out?
No.
Okay.
Or I've never seen a creature reach out and pull itself out and drop to the ground and walk off either. Never seen it.
No. So it appears the ghouls and goblins of the Bigelow days are nowhere to be found in Brandon Fugal's version of Skinwalker Ranch.
I'm not saying anything negative about our predecessors. I'm just simply saying that it just sounds so ridiculous because it's so far outside the scope of what we are investigating and documenting over the course of the last 6 years.
It's obvious Fugal is trying to distance himself from the outlandish stories of the Bigelow era, calling some of them ridiculous. However, on the History Channel show that he produces, he takes a different tone.
In the early 90s, Robert Bigelow bought Skinwalker Ranch, and his team conducted a very aggressive scientific investigation. The Bigelow team ended up having all sorts of strange things happen.
With spooky music and dramatic effect, the Bigelow stories of the past are used to amplify, support, and validate Fugal's current endeavors.
Robert Bigelow's NIDS team actually started seeing everything from cattle mutilations to UFOs to portals that would open up above the old homesteads. And those events, I think, underscored how special this property was as a center of gravity for paranormal activity.
The story of a bulletproof wolf creature, for example, is presented a few times in Fugal's show, with a very legitimizing tone.
A very large wolf came in off the plains. The father then went inside, got a weapon, and came out and started shooting at it. Point blank, right here, shooting at the wolf.
They encountered these giant wolf-like creatures that the Native Americans would refer to as skinwalkers, and were literally impervious to gunshots.
As we previously reported, Robert Bigelow never presented any evidence at all to support any of his claims about wolf creatures or other monsters at Skinwalker Ranch. And beyond just stories, neither does Fugal.
I've heard that this ground here is the gateway for these shapeshifters or these skinwalkers.
Yeah.
All that notwithstanding, there is one spooky thing from the Bigelow days that Fugal and his team openly claim to be true. The hitchhiker. A malevolent phenomena that supposedly attaches itself to people, attacks them, and causes a wide range of injuries to their bodies. The hitchhiker phenomena, according to you, is real.
We have data demonstrating that there is validity to those claims.
Illnesses and injuries have occurred at your ranch.
Absolutely.
This, of course, leads me to an obvious question. I have to ask this question. Why are you guys here? If that is a threat, and if that is a potential, and if that can happen at any moment, what are you doing here?
The best person to answer that question is sitting right here.
What are you doing here?
Yeah, in 2017, I suffered a head injury that nearly cost me my life.
Thomas says he felt pain in his head, but had no idea what was causing it.
A doctor was preparing my wife and kids for the fact that I may not pull out of it. People ask, well, why do you go back? I come back for several reasons. First being is something that almost cost me my life became very personal. I'd like to get some answers. I'd like to know what happened.
Thomas claims doctors ran dozens of tests on him, but were left baffled as to the cause or source of his head injury.
When I was discharged from the hospital, they literally didn't know what the diagnosis was.
Really?
And so I had to sign a paper on discharge where they stated they didn't know what had taken place.
That's really interesting and difficult for me to process. That's unique. And it's not the only case, from what I understand. On the History Channel show, there are quite a few times when cast members appear to be afflicted by some kind of invisible force. Often, they end up in urgent care with various diagnoses. To be sure, it is quite shocking to watch.
We have had numerous acute medical episodes occur with participants, unfortunately, under my stewardship.
Okay.
That's why I had you sign the same liability waiver.
I had to sign a health waiver.
Yeah, the waiver of liability is something that we have required.
The waiver Fugal required me to sign before coming to Skinwalker explicitly said I could be seriously injured or worse from the paranormal phenomena at the ranch. I personally didn't feel scared at all because I didn't believe it. But deep down, I'll admit, I wondered, what if? It was time to take a tour. Fugal asked me what I'd like to see first. I tell him I want to see where it all started. This is the house where, in 2007, James Lacatski, then a scientist for the Defense Intelligence Agency, claims he witnessed a glowing paranormal apparition floating in midair. And because of this experience, Lacatski approached Senator Harry Reid about creating an official Pentagon program to study UFOs and related phenomena such as the ghostly object he claims to have seen. Funded with taxpayer money, the AAWSAP program, among other things, investigated supposed paranormal phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch. The AAWSAP program eventually ended up on the front page of the New York Times in a factually inaccurate article. That erroneous article led to a viral media circus, which has culminated with Congress spending more taxpayer money on UFOs. All that notwithstanding, the story, in many ways, started here, in this house at Skinwalker Ranch.
This is where a number of incidents have occurred. Most notably, the military official that came out and had an experience.
James Lacatski.
Correct.
So this is where James Lacatski saw the thing, the Mobius strip, the Tubular Bells appear in front of him.
Correct.
In here. It was in a kitchen or something. It was in a kitchen. Right?
It's right in that door.
Candace Lynn and Tom Lewis currently live in this house as the ranch's caretakers. They invite us inside to take a look.
So you have the kitchen right there, but it's right here. So James was actually standing right here when he saw appear where you're standing.
Right where I'm standing. So this is strange. The story is now different because James Lacatski stated multiple times that he saw the object in the kitchen. However, now that the Fugal team mistakenly thinks Lacatski had his experience in the foyer, almost like in a game of telephone, they now have their own new spooky stories about the foyer.
This is a special spot in the house. We've had multiple people witness something in front of this window, between the door and the window.
Yeah.
So it wasn't only the military guy.
Kristen was standing right here
and
looking toward the same area that James had been looking toward, and suspended in the air was this grid-like structure.
And then some other people who've been here wouldn't even sit.
Right. They won't even sit in front of this window.
No one will sit here?
Yeah.
Well, not just
Well, we sit there all the time.
Oh, okay.
But there are people that refuse to even sit where you're sitting because of what they've witnessed, suspended in the air right above you.
Right above me.
There's something about that window, and there's maybe something happened in front of that window where it's giving off a negative energy. It's the way it's been described to us.
You do have a camera.
Yes, we do. In fact, that's the only inside camera we have because of the strangeness.
Brilliant. That's exactly where I was going. I was like, have you thought about putting a There it is. Okay, great. Ever captured anything?
We've captured something will... because I have it set up so it turns on if it gets any motion. And it'll turn on sometimes. We haven't yet seen anything.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. We left the ranch house and had only walked a few dozen yards before I saw something strange. Are those bullet holes?
They are.
Shotgun. Looks like shotgun.
Yeah, we've messed with that trailer a time.
And I assume the windows shot out?
Yeah.
I mean, that trailer sat there dumpy for so long, and everyone was like, I really want to throw a rock through that window or something. And then one day, Thomas decides to pick up a rock and throw it through the window, and then it was like, all bets are off. Everybody just started going gangbusters on it.
Fugal leads me towards a rocky hill where he says a mysterious symbol is engraved in stone.
Is this the trail? Yep. Come.
Oh, we're going literally off the beaten trail. Brandon, do you ever dress ranch appropriate?
This is me dressing down.
This is you dressing
This
down.
is me.
That's him casual.
This is me casual. This is as casual as I get.
The symbol, carved into the rock, is said to be over 200 years old and is apparently a symbol from Freemasons.
So we've had a number of experts look at this symbol and determine that it is communicating as above, so below.
As above, so below is a historical phrase appropriated in modern times to describe the symbiotic relationship between Earth, below, and heaven, above. It was above this exact Rocky Mesa where Fugal claims the first UFOs of his Skinwalker Ranch tenure appeared. In June 2016, 2 months after buying Skinwalker from Robert Bigelow, a hired surveyor on the ranch called Fugal to say he had taken a photo of a UFO. At the time, Fugal was back in Salt Lake City.
And I told him, stop everything. Do not talk to anyone. Do not stop anywhere. I need you to come straight here.
This is the photo the surveyor drove 3 hours to physically show Fugal. And this is the supposed UFO.
It is a, bona fide, unidentified flying object. And it zipped away.
The description of the object zipping off comes only from the hired surveyor. Fugal would later have a falling out with this surveyor for becoming, in his words, unreliable.
He ended up turning to alcohol out there and started really acting erratically. And he basically became unreliable after about a year.
After 6 months of owning Skinwalker Ranch, Fugal still had not personally seen anything strange or paranormal.
And I was visiting every month, sometimes a couple of times a month. Stephen, I didn't see anything unusual. I didn't feel anything unusual when visiting the property.
But this all changed with a phone call in October 2016.
And then October of 2016, I receive a call from Dr. Green, Dr. Christopher Green, or Kit Green.
As I reported in the previous episode, Kit Green is a former CIA scientist with a long history of researching paranormal topics. Back in 2009, Green was one of the people who encouraged Fugal to invest his money and resources into helping Joe Firmage build an anti-gravity device. This endeavor fell apart after it was determined that Firmage's device didn't work and was based on pseudoscience. Fugal says he lost millions of dollars. Years later, in 2015, Green would call Fugal yet again and encourage him to buy Skinwalker Ranch from Robert Bigelow, which Fugal did. Then, in 2016, Kit Green was calling once more.
I receive a call from Dr. Green saying, I have an individual, an associate, who would like to visit the ranch. In fact, it's his #1 item on his bucket list in life. He's been wanting to come visit the ranch for years, and he's been denied access.
Fugal agreed to allow Green's associate, a successful surgeon, to come visit the ranch. The surgeon arrived with his son and 2 men Fugal says were the surgeon's security. No sooner had they arrived, Fugal says weird things started to happen. As they toured the ranch, the surgeon and his entourage began to complain about dizziness and sensations of vertigo.
We're sitting there and kind of marveling at what is happening. Everyone's feeling kind of off, apparently. Everyone's feeling a sensation. And then I look around, I'm like, where's the security? George was his name, the big 6'6" guy. He was not there.
One of the security guards had disappeared. Fugal says he went to look for him and found him standing upright in the back of one of the ranch's ATVs. His eyes were closed, and he was unresponsive to Fugal calling his name. Finally, Fugal says he woke up.
His eyes flutter open, and he looks down at me, and I say, is everything okay? We've What's going on? And he says, whoa, that was weird. As soon as you stopped the vehicle and everyone jumped out, as I stood up, I couldn't move my head and everything went black.
Soon after this, Fugal claims all of their phone batteries inexplicably died.
All of our phones were dead, fully drained. Battery had gone from basically about 80% charge to zilch, nothing.
The group went back to the ranch headquarters to plug their phones in. And it was during their trek back out onto the ranch that everyone, including Fugal, saw a flying saucer above the Rocky Mesa.
Right ahead of us, above the mesa, in broad daylight, within fairly close proximity, is a 40 to 50 foot silver grayish disc-like object.
Fugal says the object began moving erratically back and forth before it darted off and disappeared.
And then within a few seconds, it's gone, almost like a bullet shooting off into the distance.
Since all of their phones were dead, photos and videos of this sighting don't exist. However, while reviewing photos taken earlier that day, they discovered a photo that allegedly shows a saucer-like UFO in the sky.
And it looks strangely similar to what the three of us, have sighted above the mesa.
Later that day, the surgeon and his entourage left the ranch. Fugal says he never saw them again. But if he had been a skeptic about the ranch before, as he claims, this series of events converted him into a full believer.
It was a game-changing experience. For me, it changed my entire perspective relative to the ranch. I felt a new urgency and imperative.
This was the third time in 7 years that a phone call from the same former CIA official resulted in Fugal investing in the paranormal. We walk down from the Rocky Mesa and get inside Jurassic Park type Jeeps to take a Jurassic Park type tour of the 500-acre ranch. Here are the property's borders as seen from above. This is the ranch headquarters, known as Homestead 1. This is the Rocky Mesa, where Fugal showed me the mysterious Masonic symbol carved in stone. We drive along this dirt road, and to our left, see the first of 3 observation towers, or bait pens, from the Bigelow days.
Yeah.
You call them the bait cage or
Bait
something?
pen.
Bait pen.
Yeah, you'd have animals. You'd either have livestock or dogs as biosensors to draw the phenomena.
Bigelow would place animals in these pens as bait, and then ranch investigators would wait for a predator ghost monster to show up and, I don't know, maybe attack the animal or something. By the way, when I say predator, I literally mean predator.
Entities that were cloaking their presence, much like you see on the motion picture Predator from decades ago.
Further down the road, we enter the Triangle, a location never really mentioned by the Bigelow team, but has suddenly become a center of supposed paranormal activity during Fugal's tenure. This is a point in the ranch where you have decided something is centered or happens more often, or something.
There is a high
pattern.
Yes, there is a high frequency of unexplained activity, including electromagnetic anomalies that occur here.
Right here. Fugal's team believes there is some kind of spooky, invisible anomaly in the air above the triangle.
We've been talking about the area over the triangle being some sort of anomaly, potentially a portal, one end of a wormhole, something. What if that's the
gateway? Could
what
be
if, what if that's the other end of the wormhole?
Past the triangle, within a small patch of trees, is Homestead 2. Arguably the most iconic location on the ranch, it's a group of abandoned and desolate buildings where families used to live nearly 100 years ago. Fugal tells me Homestead 2 is possibly the most haunted spot on the ranch, a nexus of all kinds of paranormal activity.
Unexplained phenomena, for whatever reason, seems to be focused or at least a higher degree of it, is focused in this area.
According to the stories of the Bigelow era, this place was supposedly the site of shocking paranormal things, like monster spiders, portals to another dimension, poltergeist activity. And this is the location where Bigelow investigators claim they saw the infamous Dino Beaver. Fugal and his team haven't seen any monster spiders or dino beavers. They do say they have recorded strange, unknown anomalies on various scientific devices. Like the time they brought out the rabbi from Ancient Aliens, who's written books about aliens, to say a prayer in front of Homestead 2, and they noticed the temperature changed a little bit as the Ancient Aliens rabbi said the prayer.
The rabbi said it was a chant that's supposed to open up a portal.
I don't know. I guess I was secretly hoping for monster spiders. We step outside the homestead, and I ask the team if they'd ever encountered ghostly voices from invisible entities, like previous Bigelow investigators had claimed they had. Have there ever been any moments of that? Disembodied voices, telepathic voices, you?
Yes, 3 times on this ranch.
Thomas tells me a story where he and his wife went to the ranch headquarters alone in the middle of the night to troubleshoot a technical problem with one of the ranch surveillance cameras. He says the moment they arrived, they felt uneasy.
It was not a good feeling that night. It was one when you come in the gates, the hair start standing up on your arms.
While troubleshooting at a computer, they heard various strange sounds, but nothing was there. And then, he says, a voice spoke to them.
It sounded like a male or a man standing between my wife and I. We both heard it at the exact same time, just said, "You need to leave now." And my wife and I looked at each other. She's like, "Did you hear that?"
How loud was it?
About like that. "You need to leave now." And I thought it was auditory. Okay, we both thought we were hearing it with our ears. I went to reach forward for the mouse and on this download, and we heard it a second time. "You need to leave now."
Frightened, Thomas and his wife did leave. But he says he would hear a similar disembodied voice on the ranch on 2 other occasions.
And at this point, you know, having been raised very religious, you know, the Holy Ghost, this still small voice, right? That's what I assigned it to.
Thomas grew up in the Mormon religion. The Holy Ghost in Mormonism is described as a still small voice, and is believed to be a real spiritual entity that comforts you, guides you, and sometimes literally talks to you. I also grew up Mormon, and I would often hear church members tell stories about a voice that spoke to them. Usually, in most of the stories I heard, the voice was a warning. Don't go down that alleyway. Don't go to that party. Don't get in that car. For Thomas, he says he heard,
"You need to leave now."
It's hard not to notice how religion plays a role in a Skinwalker Ranch. Specifically, you know, Mormonism. Does Mormonism directly or indirectly play a role?
That's a valid question. When you have so many participants that have a similar cultural background or cultural programming.
Everyone in the Skinwalker crew that I met that day had at one point been involved with the Mormon Church. I was curious, you guys, is everyone here at this table either current Mormon, grew up Mormon, Mormon heritage, that kind of thing? I was just curious about it culturally.
I would say, yeah, we've all have experiences, and we're all in different places with that, I would say.
That's how I met Bryan.
Yeah.
I was his mission trainer.
Oh, you were his senior companion?
That's correct.
He was my father.
Yeah, you guys were...
He was my senior companion, my trainer in Hawaii.
Fugal and Arnold met each other on a Mormon mission in Hawaii in 1992. And as someone who also served a Mormon mission and was, at one point, actively involved with the church, it's hard not to notice the religion's subtle influences here at Skinwalker Ranch.
Mormon theology, I believe, provides a very compelling roadmap or explanation when it comes to understanding our place in the universe. I mean, I love my faith. I was raised to believe that we're not alone in the universe, that there are worlds without number, that there is a higher power, that there is a divine, inspired nature to our existence.
When Fugal says there are worlds without number, that comes directly from Mormon theology. In the church, it's taught that there are multiple dimensions of reality, separated by a spiritual fabric of space-time they call the veil. Within all of these dimensions are worlds without number, worlds full of people who are alien to our Earth. Traveling between these dimensions is possible through the power of God and through the power of Satan. It should be noted that Harry Reid, the late U.S. Senator who believed there was indeed something paranormal at Skinwalker Ranch, and who went on to sponsor the creation of a Pentagon program to study and investigate the ranch, was also a lifelong member of the Mormon Church. When asked by journalist and former Bigelow associate George Knapp how he reconciled his Mormon beliefs with a study of the paranormal, Reid said this:
Anyone that's looked at Mormonism at all understands that we believe that there are other worlds, and so Joseph Smith, when he was murdered at 38, he came up with this idea. He claimed he got it from, as we believe, from divine intervention, but he was right and others are wrong, because I think there's no question that there are other worlds.
But proving that scientifically has been somewhat elusive. Proving that there's an afterlife, that there are other dimensions of reality. And I think at Skinwalker Ranch, we truly have accomplished what no one else has accomplished, and that is we've proven that there is more to our reality than meets the eye.
Fugal saying he's proven some of these things intrigues me, because throughout the day, I'd heard lots of emphatic claims and compelling stories, but I still hadn't seen anything with my own eyes. So I asked them to show me. We enter the ranch command center. What was once Robert Bigelow's bedroom is now a very impressive headquarters full of high-tech computers, monitors, and other scientific devices. Fugal has spared no expense in buying top-of-the-line equipment for his investigations at the ranch.
That in particular, that's a $30,000
This is
computer.
the brain.
It's a supercomputer.
Supercomputer.
Yeah, well, here.
It looks like a few black and white photos I've seen.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Huh? What is this? It says Satan 1.
Right. So that's an acronym. It's a Sentinel Assignment, Telemetry, and Notification.
Including Satan, Erik Bard has assigned religious names to various pieces of equipment. Cain, Adam, Eve.
I've got something to show you.
Oh, please.
Okay.
Erik Bard then reveals brand new evidence he just found on the ranch. So new, Fugal hasn't even seen it yet.
This is the first time I'm seeing this material.
It's a crystalline material, and there's an abundance of it out at the Homestead area.
Wow. Have you analyzed this yet?
No.
Where did you find this?
This is out in the vicinity of Homestead, too. It's
Under the ground? On the ground?
You can see it reflecting light on the surface of the ground.
Huh. And you've never seen it before? Meaning it stuck out to you as something new?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something that could be perfectly natural, but, it raises questions. Is this only found in that area? Could it have some relationship to the phenomenology itself out there?
Is it natural? What kind of process could have caused this? Is it geologic?
Yeah, so we're gonna take a closer look at this.
Okay.
I decide I need to see more than just normal-looking rocks discovered where rocks are usually found. Fugal has installed dozens and dozens of surveillance cameras on the ranch, and all of that video comes through here, and computers highlight any movement or strangeness. So with cameras all over the place, running 24/7 for many years now, what are the best examples of paranormal activity they've captured on video?
What are some of the best examples of something anomalous?
This is what he shows me.
Go ahead, say it out loud. What's your first impression? And what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see that movement?
Bug.
Yes.
I see a spider hanging from a web that is not being picked up on camera, in the wind blowing it, is what I see. You could see legs almost. It almost looks like a body with legs going like this.
Okay.
See?
Okay.
The video clip is only 20 seconds long. As such, we're not able to see what occurred before or after the blurry bug thing appeared. This limits the ability to fully come to a conclusion.
So this thing goes out of sight, and that's it. That's it. So is it conclusive? No, I don't think it is, but boy, it's interesting.
They show this same clip on the History Channel show, but they edit it in a way that makes it seem like it appears out of thin air.
I really want your thoughts on what this might be.
What on earth is that?
Then, after only briefly looking at it, Travis Taylor suggests the blurry bug thing might be something like...
I'll tell you what it reminds me of. The Tic Tac UAP video. The UAP that appeared in the Tic Tac video that was recorded by the USS Nimitz Group in 2004.
What? Here's some night vision footage I found of a spider spinning a web. These white orbs are just the infrared reflecting off the silk. It's not a perfect match, but it makes more sense than a Tic Tac UFO that can travel at 80,000 miles an hour. This is the next video that they show me.
Okay. Yeah, so something's up here moving what I think is like a moth.
It's very bug-like, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very erratic and bug-like.
Mm-hmm. Here's the problem. Look at the timestamp. Look at the date.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cold?
Yeah.
Oh, it's middle of winter.
Yep.
Okay.
You see the problem?
Yeah.
Now, the thing that caught my attention about this is the way this thing exits the scene. I could see that this object literally shrinks as it recedes, as if towards the horizon. Really fast. Okay, so here we go. You see what happens there?
Play it again.
So here we go.
It's like the Millennium Falcon hits hyperspace, you know?
And that's why sometimes when I play this for people, I'll make that noise.
While it may be fun to pretend that this is a craft zipping away at high speed, in reality, there is simply not enough data there to fully identify what it is.
Do you understand how someone could go down a rabbit hole, an endless rabbit hole, on something like this, where when I see that, I'm like, I think that's a moth. Pending any new data beyond this one video, is it worth my time, really, to obsess about it?
There is no authoritative answer. You're the one who's going to provide that answer.
And this is the final video I'm shown. In one of the ranch's abandoned buildings, in the middle of the day, two glowing objects float in midair. A bird flaps around and squawks. The two objects appear to float up towards the bird. The bird then flies away.
Oh, dude, the instant it reaches the bird, it flies away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want you to give me one or two prosaic explanations for this.
Sure. Caterpillars, the silk worms?
Yes.
Like the caterpillars, they do that. They suspend in air like that. And so when I saw...
let's take a look. I like this comparison.
The only thing that makes me think it's not this is just the light. There does seem to be a source of light.
Right.
That is strange, though. I'll give you that. That is weird. Why should your average person care? Is it, in the grand scheme of things, is what I just saw on this, like, who cares?
So we've gone from seeing 2 flashes of light in a carriage house to some really deep dive philosophical questions. And to me, that's at least part of the point of this.
Okay.
I like this discourse. I like to take it there. Take a moment and forget about all the other mundane stuff, the stuff that goes on in daily life, and think for a moment about, well, what would it mean to me if I were to see that type of an event? Okay, I don't think there's just one answer to this. I have my answer, you have yours, I would assume.
But I think what you just said is, what would happen if?
Yes.
That question, what would happen if, I think sums up UFOs, the paranormal,
yes,
all of it, is that what would happen if? Brandon Fugal flies back to Salt Lake City to attend to his real estate business. He's given me permission to sleep overnight in a tent out at Homestead 2 by myself. I was about to head out when Thomas and Erik sat me down and tried to talk me out of it.
We've never allowed somebody to be out there by themselves, alone, just because of all the safety, the health issues that we've had.
They asked me if I'd be okay if they came out with me and remained close throughout the night as a safeguard in case anything happened to me. I said no. I wanted to be alone out there, to experience it alone.
Sure.
I think having like chaperones up on the hillsides isn't what I planned on doing. It soon became apparent to me that they were indeed legitimately worried about me. I could see in their eyes real, genuine concern. You guys are worried about me. You're really worried about me, aren't you?
This isn't ghost tales that we've made up to narrative out there. These are things where real live individuals that were here suffered serious consequences.
They tell me they're concerned because multiple people have been previously attacked and injured by paranormal forces on the ranch, specifically out at Homestead 2. And there was no cell phone reception out there. If something happened to me, I'd be on my own.
Here's the deal. If we send you over there by yourself and something bad happens and we're over here, not only are we worried about the fact that we may not be able to get to you in time, and I'll tell you right now, I've personally been on cases where it came down to minutes of getting somebody off. I mean, it was that serious of an issue.
I finally agree to take a walkie-talkie with me to at least remain in radio contact with the team. Before I head out, Erik tells me,
Your presence here is an experiment. It literally could yield data.
He's curious to see if I will provoke the paranormal into revealing itself. I'm in the bait pen. I'm in the bait pen.
I wasn't thinking of it in those terms.
New bait. Yeah.
Right.
Like a worm on a hook. I appreciate it. As I drove out onto the ranch, it felt like I was inside a church, a 500-acre church, where believers saw miracles, signs, and wonders. And I, a skeptic, saw nothing. Was I missing something? Was I blind? Would a night at Skinwalker Ranch open my eyes? Was I in for some kind of unholy baptism? Hopefully they're not showing this footage at my funeral. As I set up my tent outside supposedly the most dangerous place on the ranch, I thought about the concern in the eyes of Thomas and Erik. They were probably wondering what kinds of terrible things awaited me. What kind of monsters would soon reveal themselves? What kind of ghosts would haunt me? Was I worried about those things? No. But as the sun set and my night at Skinwalker Ranch began, I found myself wondering, what if? There's a part of this story that I haven't told yet, because I couldn't figure out how to tell it. But as I set up my tent on Skinwalker Ranch, I thought about something I'd seen and heard earlier that day. Something that changed my perception of the land I was walking on.
This right here is the end of Skinwalker Ranch. This is the perimeter, right?
Correct. This is owned by the Ute tribe.
So right here is Native American land. Look, there's a bone right there. This is fascinating to me because I knew the local tribes were near proximity to Skinwalker. You are literally touching. I've seen the black and white photos of what look like skins.
They're bladders. Animal bladders.
Yeah.
When I acquired the property in 2016, they were hanging on the fence line. And I asked the security, what are these? What is this about? This is kind of gross. And he said that the neighboring tribe had placed these on the fence line in order to keep the demonic shape-shifting entities on this property and off of theirs. That it would ward off
the Skinwalker.
When the Mormon pioneers entered Utah in the 1800s, they encountered the Ute Native Americans, indigenous tribes that had lived there for centuries. As the Mormons began building towns and cities, brutal and bloody wars were fought to control the land. For decades, the Utes battled to defend the home of their ancestors. The consequences were devastating. A microcosm of a national genocide, the Ute population suffered and dwindled from disease and war. Defeated and often at gunpoint, they were placed inside America's second largest Indian reservation, the Ute and Outrage.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who should wear the robe and crown. Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, sinners, let's go down, come on down. Oh, sinners, let's go down in the river to pray.
As the sun went down over Skinwalker Ranch, I thought about these people and their ghosts that some say haunt this land.
I am setting up my tent in front of Homestead 2 here on Skinwalker Ranch, which, according to the scientists and people who work here, is one of the most, as you would say, haunted places on the ranch. A lot of activity has been recorded happening here, so naturally I'm going to spend the night here.
For my night on the ranch, I set up a motion detecting night vision trail camera to monitor my campsite the entire night. Also, I had a military-grade night vision monocular lent to me by the Skinwalker investigators. and I had my video camera with consumer-grade night vision. After my cameraman left, I was alone on the ranch for the rest of the night. Another piece of equipment I was told to bring is a lightning strike detector. Electrical interference, this thing will glow and beep an alarm. Once set up, the first thing I did was, obviously... Right now I'm heading to the field where the dino beaver apparently appeared. I went to look for a dino beaver, a half-dinosaur, half-beaver monster that previous Skinwalker investigators claimed came out of the field just south of Homestead 2. So south of Homestead 2? Right here. But the dino beaver field was empty. I saw 0 dino beavers. Maybe dino beavers only come out after midnight. I crossed a small stream and headed up to the abandoned Carriage House. This is where Fugal and his team captured video of 2 glowing objects in the middle of the day. They had previously shown me this video, so I figured I'd check it out. So right up here is where they saw that thing on the video. Right up in here, in this area here. So I don't see anything that would explain those 2 objects that were in here. Now, there's this chair and a human body-sized freezer for some reason, and claw marks. Those aren't claw marks. And I bet it's locked. Oh, shit, it's not. Oh, okay. Just electrical stuff. Okay, whew, I'm really glad. I don't know what I'd expected, to be honest with you. Walking back to the main road, I heard a noise. Okay, I legitimately heard something up down that way, down this road. Let me get my big flashlight out. I was crossing the road here. I heard like a thump, a little tap in that direction. And I couldn't help but notice multiple glowing objects right in front of my camera that were similar to other objects previously seen on the ranch. Now I'd hate to bug you, but I'm looking for someone to help me analyze this footage. No. Preferably someone really good at science and mathematics.
Dreamboat, won't you ride on my dreamboat?
Skinwalker Ranch was not the first time Brandon Fugal invested his money into paranormal/religious investigations. In 2004, he founded the Ancient Historical Research Foundation, or AHRF, a group of Mormons who went on Indiana Jones-type quests in North and South America, looking for physical evidence of the religious stories in the Bible and Joseph Smith's Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon claims Native Americans are actually ancient Israelites who sailed to America and that God cursed them with darker skin for their wickedness. In educational images used by the Mormon Church, the faithful followers of Christ are shown with lighter skin, and the wicked, evil dissenters are shown with darker skin. The AHRF sought out physical evidence of these ancient Book of Mormon civilizations. In presentations at Mormon-owned Brigham Young University, the Foundation presented a hunt for religious stones, ancient treasure, and the skeletal remains of biblical giant mummies. Giant mummies. A list of their projects showed they were not only seeking evidence to prove the Book of Mormon true, but were also looking for evidence of Bigfoot and UFOs. Fugal says he left the AHRF in 2005, just 1 year after founding it. But the organization's website listed him as director as recently as 2020. Fugal says this error is due to the AHRF website not being updated because the person in charge of updating the website had been sick and eventually died. Fugal's biography on a 2017 SEC document lists him as a current board member of AHRF that year. and his own biography on the website of his current company, Colliers International, listed him as being involved with AHRF as recently as 2022. Regarding this factual contradiction, Fugal says, "I contributed nothing to AHRF after 2005. After the sun set, clouds blocked out the moon and stars, and the ranch was pitch black. I broke out the night vision monocular and was amazed at what I saw. I could see right through the clouds, and I saw every star in the sky. And it's at this point that I saw multiple unidentified objects."
Yep, there goes another one. It's crazy. This has been going on, though, for now maybe 4 minutes. I've seen at least 6 objects. You know what a satellite looks like up in the sky when it goes by? Like, imagine that a little brighter and just like tons of them in a row.
Since the monocular was not a camera, I tried my best to hold my camera up to it, but I couldn't see what it was seeing. Luckily, I did capture one of the objects. I saw 8 to 10 of these, one at a time, flying in the same place over the course of 4 to 5 minutes. I later went to inthesky.org, put in the exact location and time of my sighting, and was able to determine that what I was seeing was simply a line of Starlink satellites. So, a simple explanation. But I can see how someone at Skinwalker Ranch, maybe alone, at night, could look up and think they were seeing something strange.
Erik, was that you?
Around this time, I got a call on the radio from Erik Bard and Thomas Winterton. They said a surveillance camera on top of the Rocky Mesa was capturing the audio of someone or something screaming.
So, Steven, the camera that was picking up the voices is actually up on top of the mesa, facing the west hill.
Right now, they just said someone out here was screaming Erik's name, Erik, at a camera. And he heard his name, Erik?
Yeah, he heard it 3 times, and it did sound like it was yelling. So if it wasn't you, then it was somebody else.
That's a negative on me. I was not yelling at all, and I didn't say his name.
Copy that.
That's weird. I've been out here. I haven't heard any yelling.
That someone was on top of the mesa, screaming Erik's name over and over, was a bit disturbing. So I took advantage of this creepy moment to go inside the most haunted place on the ranch, Homestead 2. In 2018, Brandon Fugal says a staffer on the Senate Armed Services Committee called him and asked if he'd come to Washington, D.C. to brief committee members on Skinwalker Ranch.
Who called you? Someone from Senator McCain's office.
Did they call on behalf of Senator McCain? I'm calling on behalf of the senator who is interested. Is that accurate? You're nodding, yes? Okay.
At the time, Senator McCain was the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and the staffer that called Fugal was Thomas Kurt McConnell, who worked and works on the committee staff. McConnell did not return multiple requests from me for comment. The Senate committee, however, did, but we'll get to that in a moment. Fugal says he prepared this PowerPoint presentation on Skinwalker Ranch, and then flew to D.C. for the briefing.
We go through metal detectors. We're led into it. We're meeting in a certain building in Washington, D.C., and we go into this huge briefing room.
He shows me photos taken during the briefing. He wouldn't allow me to capture these photos on camera. In the photos, I saw men in suits that I didn't recognize, but some other faces were familiar. Hal Putoff, who was involved with Skinwalker Ranch since 1996 when Robert Bigelow first bought the ranch, and who later played a pivotal role in selling the ranch to Fugal, was there. And also,
I think.
That's Brendan McKernan.
Oh, yeah. He was one of them.
That's Brendan McKernan.
Brandon McKernan is a naval intelligence officer who many people don't know about because publicly, he's mostly kept a low profile. A rare photo of him is seen here in a naval public affairs publication. According to a former Pentagon official, McKernan has been involved with hunting UFOs since at least 2015. Former Pentagon official Lue Elizondo filed a complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office after the Pentagon denied he was the director of an official Pentagon UFO program. In the complaint, which we previously reported on, Elizondo claims he ran this UFO program until 2017, and that McKernan was part of his team. McKernan would go on to become the director of the Pentagon's official UFO task force, which was created in August 2020.
Here's the interesting thing. As we commenced the presentation, I was interrupted by the gentleman at the head of the table, and he said, wait, before we proceed any further, I want to establish an understanding. All the gentlemen here, Mr. Fugal, that you're presenting to, are all very well aware of the reality of the UFO phenomenon. So please dispense with any part of your presentation that would seek to convince us of the reality, because we already know.
Who said that?
One of the individuals leading the discussion.
A source familiar with this briefing told me that this was Sean Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick is the director of the Pentagon's current UFO office called the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. Hi, this is Steve Greenstreet with the New York Post. I'm following up on an email. I reached out to the Senate Armed Services Committee to confirm and ask about this 2018 meeting with Fugal, and I immediately got the runaround. So I sent an email already 3 days ago, 4 days ago now, I guess, and I just haven't heard anything. For weeks, I called, emailed, called some more. Last time I called, you guys said he was calling me, when he had a moment, and that was, a couple days ago. I got the feeling that someone didn't want to talk about this, and they were hoping I'd simply go away. But I didn't. I was curious if you could give me a timeline on when I might get a response. Oh my God. I have spent weeks that have turned into months just to get answers to basic questions. Did this happen? Who was there? Why did it happen? Finally, after 2 months, I finally got a response. A committee spokesperson states, in 2018, Mr. Fugal updated a handful of Senate staffers on plans for his properties. No senators were involved, and no subsequent briefings were held. This makes no sense. First of all, I saw photos of this briefing. So they're saying it was just a handful of Senate staffers. No, Department of Defense officials were there. Also, they say staffers on the Senate Armed Services Committee fly a Utah real estate mogul to DC to brief them on plans for his real estate properties. That makes zero sense. Fugal says this briefing was all about Skinwalker. The sole purpose was about Skinwalker Ranch. I emailed the spokesperson these follow-up questions, to no response. I called and emailed some more, again, to no response. If this was about a scandal, whether it be a sexual scandal or some kind of embezzlement or fraud or just something massive, I could understand the runaround and avoiding me and stuff like that, but it's about a spooky haunted ranch. Behind the scenes, a former government official told me that in the government there are many fans of UFOs in Skinwalker Ranch. Fans who unofficially and out of personal interest seek out the paranormal, often during the workday, on the taxpayer's dime. I reached out multiple times to the Department of Defense for comment on all of this. They did not respond. I entered Homestead 2, and within minutes, heard several noises.
What was that? I heard a thump over here. So this is creepy. Did you hear that? Right here. So over there, I heard a thump. And I just heard it again. I swear to God, I keep hearing it. What? So I've heard like 4 low thumps and 1 high thump. Who knows? I mean, everything moves in this building because it's like falling apart. Did you hear that? I hope the camera captured that. That was a loud one.
I attributed the thumps to maybe the dilapidated structure moving as I walked around. Or maybe an animal. Walking outside of the building, something flew right past me.
Whoa. Holy crap, what was that? It was just a blur. No sound. Flew right up into here.
I thought maybe it was a bat, but I couldn't tell. Entering the next building, I found a bat.
Jesus Christ, that's a bat. So it was a bat I saw.
Before moving on, I noticed a crawl space under the homestead.
I'm not getting in there, dude. And it's not because of spooky stuff, it's because of rattlesnakes.
I turned on my night vision to peek inside. Sorry. That was fake. I just felt like you deserved at least one good scare. In a 2012 National Geographic video, this future Skinwalker Ranch investigator listed his scientific qualifications to include alien invasions.
I'm a subject matter expert in space defense, asymmetric warfare, rocket science, and alien invasions.
This is Travis Taylor. He doesn't like me very much, and he was not present when I visited Skinwalker Ranch. But he's arguably the star of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch on the History Channel. So let's get to know him.
There's something glowing in the sky. Let's go talk to it.
Taylor has multiple science degrees from multiple universities. His 2 PhDs are in optical science and aerospace engineering. Throughout his career, he's worked on various programs for the Department of Defense, including the U.S. Army's Space and Missile Defense Command. He's also an avid storyteller, the author of 19 science fiction books with titles like One Day on Mars, Human by Choice, and Bringers of Hell. And for the last 13 years, he's appeared on multiple TV shows. He starred in Rocket City Rednecks, a reality show where self-described rednecks do various science experiments. In one episode, they build a rocket powered by moonshine. More recently, Taylor is known for his appearance in almost 40 episodes of Ancient Aliens, a show which promotes the pseudoscientific idea that humans were created by aliens, or descended from aliens, or something like that. Taylor says he's been an expert on the Ancient Aliens theory since he was 10 years old. A small sample of Taylor's other paranormal claims include a personal encounter with a Native American ghost.
A native walked into my bedroom, a really old native,
who he says touched him and cut his face.
So when I looked in the mirror, I was bleeding from that spot.
And also a story about how the Skinwalker poltergeist decapitated one of his chickens.
I had like an electromagnetic attack on my chicken house and decapitated a chicken.
Back in 2019, while filming Season 1 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Taylor says he went to the Pentagon to brief some curious officials about what he was seeing on the ranch. And it was there, he says, that he met Jay Stratton for the first time. This is Jay Stratton. He was a naval intelligence officer who, over the course of 30 years, held many positions in the Department of Defense. Many don't know his name because he's only just recently retired and made his first public appearances. But while in the government, Stratton was involved with UFOs in Skinwalker Ranch for at least 15 years. Back in 2007, Stratton says he read the book Hunt for the Skinwalker, along with his co-worker James Lacatski at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Our previous report debunks many aspects of this book, which contains many spooky stories, but provides no evidence at all to back up any of its claims. Despite this, both Stratton and Lacatski were fascinated by the book and its stories of UFOs, ghosts, and monsters. Lacatski lobbied Senator Harry Reid to acquire $22 million to study UFOs in Skinwalker Ranch. Lacatski was the director of this study, a program called AAWSAP, and Stratton was a lead investigator. In Lacatski's self-published book about AAWSAP, he refers to Stratton with a pseudonym, Jonathan Axelrod. But it's now been confirmed to me by multiple sources that Axelrod is Stratton. The book says Stratton first went to Skinwalker Ranch in 2009, and while there, he became possessed, or infected, with a poltergeist, and that it followed him home and tormented his family. The following is a partial list of what Stratton reportedly encountered. A huge wolf-like creature, screaming black shadowy humanoids, nightmarish dogmen, dark humanoid creatures. Even after AAWSAP was shut down in 2012, Stratton continued his pursuit of the paranormal, utilizing his position at the Pentagon to move the needle. It's reported that Stratton used his clout to create an official UFO task force within the Pentagon. He would then become the director of this task force. And that brings us back to Stratton's 2019 meeting with Travis Taylor. At the meeting, Stratton says he had a copy of one of Taylor's books, had read it, and was very impressed. It was a book about how to defend Earth from a possible alien invasion. It was in this meeting, again a briefing about Skinwalker Ranch, that Stratton asked Taylor if he wanted to join his UFO task force at the Pentagon. Taylor says he responded, "Hell yes." For the next 2 to 3 years, Travis Taylor would secretly work with Jay Stratton at the Pentagon, hunting UFOs and the paranormal, while also starring in entertainment shows on the History Channel about UFOs and the paranormal. I say secretly because Brandon Fugal and the rest of the Skinwalker crew say they had no idea Taylor was doing this. In June 2022, after retiring from the Pentagon, Taylor finally went public with his secret. The Skinwalker crew was shocked.
So it was a bit of a shock.
In a video on the official Skinwalker Ranch website, Skinwalker Chief Security Officer Bryan Arnold addresses this directly with Taylor.
It's hard to kind of wrap my head around to find out that, you were wearing two hats.
Taylor states he couldn't tell them about his secret Pentagon position because he swore an oath not to.
I signed an oath, I swore an oath actually, to protect that information, so I couldn't do anything about it.
But he tells the crew that he used his Pentagon position to protect them and the ranch from men in black.
I was giving you guys back cover. Jay Stratton told me was that if we find anybody doing anything illegal, if we find these men in black, that we're taking them down.
In UFO folklore, men in black are mythical government agents that work to suppress the truth about aliens and other things. Often, these men in black themselves are paranormal, appearing out of nowhere with strange, sometimes ghostly faces. However, beyond stories, there is no evidence that they even exist. It should be noted that Travis Taylor has publicly said that he thinks I, Stephen Greenstreet, just might be working for these nefarious men in black.
Man, it sure does seem like some of these guys, like Greenstreet, for example, have a motivation, a shadow group behind the curtain that's driving this, paying this, funding this.
That maybe these men in black are paying me to debunk things like Skinwalker Ranch.
If we find, some shadow organization or some Men in Black or whatever, then they're breaking the law.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to find them and bring them to justice.
This is, of course, not true and is utterly ridiculous. I was told by someone who previously spent years on the ranch to walk to the west gate that borders the Native American reservation and to pay attention to how I felt once I got there. They told me every time they did this that they felt and experienced something strange and sometimes frightening. Arriving at the gate, I felt fear for the first time of the night. Now that I've walked to the end of the line, literally, I can feel in my brain that a little bit of the spooky feeling. I'm starting to feel it a little bit. For some reason, I feel like I have to say I harbor no ill emotion or intentions. And then my lightning strike detector went off. My lightning strike detector just went off. It just beeped and it said relocate. That means right where I am, there's some kind of electrical thing. And then my eyes started to burn. God, Jesus, hi. My face started to burn. What the f***? I went back to my campsite and poured water on my eyes and face, to no avail. God damn it, it's hurting my eyes. Look at my eyes. Especially this one. Look how swollen it is. What the hell was happening to me? Brandon Fugal claims Skinwalker Ranch is the biggest scientific endeavor of our time.
Little old me, Brandon Fugal, in the commercial real estate sector, is running arguably the most aggressive science discovery program.
But when it came time to define Skinwalker Ranch in legal documents, the word science was nowhere to be found. Fugal trademarked Skinwalker Ranch as a place of entertainment for the purpose of producing multimedia, movies, and TV shows. A location for entertainment, motion picture, television exploitation. Sure. The word science doesn't appear.
Oh.
Why?
My initial efforts to trademark Skinwalker and Skinwalker Ranch was to control the integrity and to preserve the integrity of what we're doing.
Fugal says he trademarked Skinwalker for purposes of entertainment to prevent others from using the Skinwalker name on various books, movies, and websites, which is something that's happened many times in the past.
I don't know that you can trademark scientific research.
But you could trademark a scientific company. You could trademark a scientific endeavor,
but
a scientific
you don't
team,
trademark
a scientific brand.
Oh, well, I don't think Apple or SpaceX has filed a trademark for, I may be wrong.
Yeah, I'd be surprised to learn that SpaceX, as a brand, trademarked themselves as an entertainment, television, motion picture exploitation group. A trademark for SpaceX says its goods and services are aerospace vehicles, namely launch vehicles and rockets. Another SpaceX document states, in part, that its primary class is scientific and technological services and research. At what point, Brandon, does Skinwalker Ranch rise above being a book for sale on Amazon or being a reality show on History Channel?
It already has. Game over, Stephen Greenstreet. Yeah. Skinwalker Ranch has transcended books, media. We've proven that there is a legitimate scientific investigation and discovery.
Fugal may claim to have legitimate scientific discoveries, but he has yet to properly present that. Have you had submitted for peer review, scientific peer review?
Not yet.
Instead, he and his crew attend science fiction entertainment conventions like AlienCon, Phenomicon, and Fan X. fans buy tickets to attend, and some of these tickets are quite pricey. The pricier tickets often include VIP access, autographs, and selfies. In other words, entertainment. And some Utah government officials are spending taxpayer money to invest in Skinwalker Ranch, hoping to drive up local tourism. An investigation by Erica Lukes and Jack Brewer at Expanding Frontiers Research, an independent nonprofit, revealed financial documents showing Uinta County officials worked with Skinwalker Ranch crew members to create Phenomicon, a convention where fans pay money to meet paranormal celebrities like the Skinwalker Ranch crew members. Documents also show county officials paid Skinwalker crew members tens of thousands of dollars for their appearances and involvement. Travis Taylor, for example, was paid a little over $10,000 for his participation. Now, of course, city, county, and state governments hyping up a local supposed paranormal location to generate tourism is nothing new. Just look at the city of Roswell, New Mexico, the location of probably the most famous UFO case in history. Roswell is a kind of alien mecca. The city's welcome sign has a flying saucer on it, and I'm sure annual profits from tourism have become both expected and essential to the city's income. But there is a big difference between Skinwalker Ranch and a place like Roswell. Roswell doesn't claim visiting its city could possibly kill you. As we previously reported, the most shocking Skinwalker claim is that an evil poltergeist, which they call the hitchhiker, can infect you, attach itself to you, and then infect other people around you. In James Lacatski's book about his Skinwalker investigations, he refers to this poltergeist as an infectious agent, a contagion, and compares it to COVID-19. I asked Fugal if he agreed with Lacatski's claims about a contagious hitchhiker. Hitchhikers, an evil presence that attaches itself to people and spreads like a contagion.
Yes.
The hitchhiker phenomena, according to you, is real.
We have data demonstrating that there is validity to those claims.
Illnesses and injuries have occurred at your ranch.
Absolutely.
Jay Stratton claims he became infected with the hitchhiker in 2009 and that his family suffered many health effects. Travis Taylor at Phenomicon, again an event sponsored and promoted by Utah government officials, says Jay Stratton infected his neighbor and that this infection gave her cancer. Taylor then shockingly claims that Robert Bigelow, former owner of Skinwalker Ranch, sold the ranch in 2016 because the ranch killed his wife. This claim is even more bizarre because Bigelow's wife died in 2020, 4 years after Bigelow sold the ranch. Before I could visit Skinwalker Ranch, I had to sign a waiver that acknowledged that the paranormal might hurt me, injure me, or even kill me. These are very serious claims, and Fugal and his crew claim to be very serious about them.
We do take it seriously. We have brought in leading healthcare professionals.
Have you ever contacted the CDC?
No, we've just referred anyone to medical professionals. We've had medical attention immediately given to those who have experienced some of these things.
I can understand, someone trips and falls, a unique experience causes a unique injury.
Sure.
But when there's a list, and you're very public about this on
Right.
Twitter, you're very public that there is an ongoing, consistent, physical threat to the human body and to human beings.
Sure.
Why haven't you called the CDC?
Because I don't know that the CDC is capable of assessing or even commenting on the nature of what we are dealing with out there.
Have you ever contacted the National Institute of Health, the National Institute of Sciences?
No.
Offered to brief them?
No.
If it was me and there was especially a place that I owned and it was a location and I was inviting people in and some of those people got hospitalized ongoing, At some point, I'm gonna go, okay, I gotta call in the big guns here. And also...
I don't really trust the big guns.
Okay.
I mean, here's the thing.
Okay, so you don't trust the government. You don't
well,
trust...
I don't trust any authority is just as flawed.
Speaking of flawed, what do these people who claim to have been potentially exposed to a deadly pathogen do? They go on a national tour and meet hundreds of people. Infectious disease. Step right up, get your $20 selfies. Contagion. Get your tickets now. COVID-19. Hell yeah, I'll sign your alien mannequin. Children suffering. So much fun. Death. But wait, there's more. Fugal claims the ranch can possibly injure or kill you at any moment, and then he flies out celebrities for a tour of the ranch. Like Trent Reznor, Post Malone, and Darth Vader. Who wouldn't want to bring Darth Vader to Skinwalker Ranch? I also invited Darth Sidious, Ian McDiarmid, but he chickened out.
We do take it seriously.
I can't emphasize enough how much this makes no sense. There is a complete lack of logic here. But it gets worse.
Hey, gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Attorney General for the state of Utah, Sean Reyes.
The Utah State Attorney General, Sean Reyes, appears on the Skinwalker TV show a couple of times. Fugal says Reyes has been briefed for years about the events at Skinwalker Ranch.
Brandon's been keeping me updated.
Reyes says he speaks on behalf of the citizens of Utah.
On behalf of the citizens of the state of Utah.
And that Skinwalker Ranch is an important issue for the state.
These are important issues for our state.
Beyond his appearances on the show, Reyes attends science fiction conventions, sitting next to Fugal in the Skinwalker crew. I sent Reyes multiple questions about all of this, to no response. Why? I emailed the governor of Utah asking if Skinwalker, per his attorney general, is in fact an important issue for the state, and if so, what's being done to keep people safe? The governor's office declined to comment. Why? United States Senator Mike Lee went to Skinwalker Ranch with his staff and was given a briefing by Fugal. Fugal says Lee and his staff signed the same health waiver I did. Senator Lee's office did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Why? Why are state and federal officials seemingly endorsing and validating, in part, claims of a deadly contagion that harms human beings, while at the same time apparently doing nothing about it, beyond appearing on a reality TV show and attending sci-fi conventions? These are questions that demand answers. I got inside my tent, hoping sleep might alleviate my burning eyes. I woke up the next morning with my eye still swollen. At this point, I was convinced it was simply my allergies to weeds and grass. The last time my eyes swelled like this was 20 years ago, while I was living in Utah. I go back to Skinwalker headquarters, and Erik Bard reveals that the noises I heard inside Homestead 2
What was that?
could have been caused by a group of raccoons that he saw on a surveillance camera.
Yes, there were some animals out there with you.
What kind of animals?
Raccoons.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And as for the screaming they heard on top of the mesa,
Right now, they just said someone out here was screaming Erik's name.
You heard your name yelled last night.
No. Right. I'm glad you're asking about this. We do have the family of raccoons that go up the side of the mesa.
also probably raccoons. After a few more minutes of conversation, I left Skinwalker Ranch. I stopped at a gas station and bought some allergy medicine. And within a few hours, I was fine. Spending 24 hours at Skinwalker Ranch did not convince me of its paranormal claims. The books don't convince me. And a reality show on the History Channel doesn't either. But the show does, however briefly, reveal pieces of data. Data that the Skinwalker investigators claim proves something spooky is going on.
All of this new data that we have tells us there are some really weird anomalies.
So I thought this raw data might convince me. But it's not publicly available. I tried to find some of this data on the Skinwalker Ranch website, which you have to pay money for, because it says if you pay the money, they'll give you documentation of current research. So I broke out my MasterCard and signed up, but it was mostly just more of the same. Some weird photos, some weird videos, and more spooky stories. There was no raw data. So I emailed Brandon and asked if he could send me the best raw data he has regarding the paranormal on the ranch. Specifically, I wanted to see the raw data pointing to a wormhole existing above the ranch. The wormhole theory comes from an episode where they launch a balloon and then lose the balloon, and then launch some rockets, and then something happens to the rockets. And so Travis Taylor suggests,
What if the only way to explain all these things is with a wormhole?
He suggests that maybe the balloon and the rockets went inside a wormhole. By the way, how did he already have that drawn on the chalkboard? It just looks like it took some time to do, and then it's just suddenly there. Did he maybe do it a long time ago and was just waiting for a wormhole discussion? Anyways, I asked Fugal if he could send me the best raw data he has, and he said he would. He just needed some time. So I waited, and waited, and waited. After 2 months, I told him that I couldn't wait anymore. I had to finish this episode, so I gave him a hard deadline. Finally, 4 days after the deadline, he sent me the top evidences of Skinwalker Ranch. Multiple paragraphs. Words describing spooky things. For visual aids, he included clips from the History Channel show. That's it. That's all. So if this is the best that they have, then they have a whole lot of nothing. And maybe that's the real secret of Skinwalker Ranch.
Game over, Stephen Greenstreet.
Go tell that long-tongued liar. Go tell that midnight rider. Tell the rambler, the gambler, the backbiter. Tell 'em God's gonna cut 'em down. Tell 'em God's gonna cut 'em down. You can run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
So that UFO story, you know, that one you've probably already seen on various news sites, or perhaps seen trending on X. That UFO story also involves a werewolf. Yes, I said werewolf. Pentagon officials claimed it's real, and an image was recently released showing for the first time what the creature looked like. But this story has a very strange twist. A twist that involves the country of New Zealand, $22 million, and an Xbox. Since 1995, Skinwalker Ranch in Utah is a place that many people have claimed is a hotspot for UFOs, ghosts, and monsters. Monsters like Bigfoot, and bulletproof wolf creatures. No evidence has ever been presented at all to support any of this, and my previous reporting at the Post has debunked much, if not all, of Skinwalker Ranch as a bunch of malarkey. As I previously reported, in 2007, 2 Pentagon officials named Jay Stratton and James Lacatski read a book about Skinwalker Ranch. Lacatski was a believer in the Skinwalker spooky stuff, and so he convinced Senator Harry Reid, another believer in spooky stuff, to acquire $22 million to investigate spooky stuff like Skinwalker Ranch. And as I've previously reported, it was this program that the news media erroneously reported about. They incorrectly labeled it a UFO program, without any mention of the Skinwalker Ranch spooky stuff. And to this day, the news media has yet to correct itself, continuing to report a false story about a UFO program. During the actual program back in 2009, Stratton went to Skinwalker Ranch, and it's claimed that while there, he became possessed or infected by a Skinwalker ghost, and that it followed him back to his home over 2,000 miles away in the Washington, D.C. area. In 2021, Lacatski released a self-published book about this $22 million ghost hunt, and claimed that after leaving Skinwalker Ranch, Stratton's home became haunted by evil spooky things that tormented him and his family for years. And that brings us to the werewolf. Lacatski says the first werewolf encounter happened in 2009, at night, when Stratton's wife looked out their kitchen window and saw a huge wolf creature standing on 2 legs, leaning against a tree. She claims the werewolf looked right at her in a not friendly way, and then it disappeared into the woods. 3 days later, Stratton's teenage sons claim they saw the same werewolf outside in their yard. Again, the wolf monster looks at them and then goes away. Stratton and the other government ghost hunters attributed the appearance of this werewolf as a manifestation of the Skinwalker Ranch spooky stuff that had followed Stratton home to haunt him. So did the Strattons actually witness a real werewolf? Beyond the written stories, no evidence has ever been provided regarding these encounters. For example, Jay Stratton says he found claw marks on the tree that the wolf monster was leaning on. He says he has photos of these claw marks, but he's never released them. As such, it was up to the reader to imagine what was lurking outside Stratton's suburban home. But then, in May 2023, we finally got something to sink our teeth into. Rice University invited Colm Kelleher to give a presentation on the $22 million program that investigated Skinwalker Ranch. Kelleher had been a part of this program and was also the co-author of these 2 books about Skinwalker Ranch. During his speech, Kelleher discussed the Stratton werewolf, and for the first time, we got to see what they say this creature looked like.
Left panel shows a sort of a drawing that was done on some of the family members of this guy who had brought stuff home with them, and this is what they both kids and the wife saw at different times.
He says this was, quote, a drawing that was done on some of the family members that witnessed the wolf creature. The way he phrases that sounds like a police sketch. You know, where a sketch artist comes in, listens to a physical description from a witness, and then draws a picture of the suspect. So let's look at this suspect. It's pretty scary, isn't it? Could you imagine seeing this thing at night in your backyard? Unfortunately, Kelleher quickly moves on from the werewolf and doesn't offer any additional details or address some confusing things that were on the werewolf slide, such as why does it say Axelrod instead of Stratton? Well, as I previously reported, the Skinwalker ghost hunters, such as Kelleher, refer to Jay Stratton as Jonathan Axelrod in their books. Axelrod is simply a pseudonym for Stratton. Also, what the heck is Balverine? Is that the name of the werewolf? Is that a specific breed of werewolf? Kelleher never addresses this. Also, something is written next to the werewolf sketch. I adjusted the contrast of the writing, and it says this: "Born of a full moon, those said to be bitten, who resisted poison and cheated death, becoming one of the clan." What the f? Kelleher also never addresses this. So I did some Googling, and this is where the story of Jay Stratton's werewolf goes from weird to hilarious. This specific drawing that Kelleher claimed was a sketch, quote, done on some of the Stratton family members after their 2009 encounter, is actually a piece of fan art published on the website DeviantArt in 2005, 4 years before the Stratton werewolf encounter. The artist lives in New Zealand and is a fan of the video game Fable. One of the monsters in the video game is a werewolf called a Balverine, and a Balverine werewolf is a specific fictional monster created specifically for this one specific video game. What the f***? I posted this weird discovery on X, and amazingly, Dean Carter, the actual creator of the Fable video game, replied. He was shocked to see his video game werewolf being used in university speeches about a Pentagon ghost hunting program. I'm the guy who invented Balverines. This is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me regarding my work. For those who are concerned, Balverines, 1, aren't real. 2, weren't even very original. 3, see point 1. He then shared an early concept sketch he had made of the Balverine werewolf, complete with a pile of werewolf poo. I reached out to Colm Kelleher and asked him about why he had showed a 2005 fan drawing of a video game werewolf to represent a drawing done on the Stratton family describing a creature they saw in 2009. Mr. Kelleher responded and said this: when asked to describe what they saw, the witnesses pulled Balverine from the internet and told us that this Balverine character that they pulled from the internet was the closest rendition they could find of what they had witnessed. I also asked Mr. Kelleher if he thinks it's possible that the Stratton kids, who were teenagers at the time, were perhaps fans of the Fable video game. Mr. Kelleher said he doesn't remember anyone mentioning that specific game. So all this video game stuff notwithstanding, the Strattons still claim they saw a big, hairy creature outside their home. So what was it? I think I might have an idea. Public records and Skinwalker Ranch documents show that in 2009, the Strattons lived in Mechanicsville, Maryland. Mechanicsville and many other suburban areas in southern Maryland have had multiple cases of wild black bears stumbling into people's yards over the years, and residents are often shocked and scared to see such a creature wandering through suburbia. A quick Google search brings up multiple cases of black bears in and around the town the Strattons lived in. Black bears are known to sometimes stand up on 2 legs, like this and this. The Strattons say the creature they saw was leaning against a tree. Black bears often stand up and scratch their backs on trees, like this and this. Jay Stratton says there were claw marks on the tree in his yard. This is a photo of a black bear's claw marks on a tree. And a black bear suffering from mange, which is a common skin disease, does look kind of werewolfy. So it looks very possible that the Strattons actually saw a black bear, and that they misidentified it as a werewolf. If so, that wouldn't be the last time Stratton misidentified something. Because Jay Stratton was the head of a Pentagon task force charged with investigating unidentified craft over American skies.
For years, Stratton thought he was seeing otherworldly UFOs. He thought he was seeing something spooky. But we now know that some of Stratton's UFOs were actually foreign spy craft. Stratton and his task force had misidentified them. After a Chinese spy balloon was shot out of the sky in early 2023, it was reported that similar balloons had been flying over America for years. But during this time, in the Pentagon, Stratton, quote, was diverting government resources to researching truly unconventional UFOs at the expense of addressing Chinese balloons. Stratton left the task force and was replaced as its director after complaints from some defense officials that he was, quote, crazy. And they stated they became concerned he was crazy after hearing him talk about the ghosts of Skinwalker Ranch and the Wolfman stalking his house.